Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again,
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him
Not good. Believe me, not good.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome, dissidents, one and all. A pleasant good evening to you folks. DueDissidence podcast, Keaton Weiss, here with Russell Dobular.
hello.
Beautiful. We got our mics pointed the right direction. I just had to unmute at the last second there. Had a lot of things to deal with at the last moment there.
We got our asses on straight.
Got our asses on straight. That's
and
right.
that ain't no fake accent, I'll tell you. That's the genuine article.
Yeah. All accusations aside. So, folks, thank you very much. In fact, Russell, I couldn't help but notice because you premiered this on our Patreon exclusive stream last night. But it seems like you have your Hunter S. Thompson mug again tonight. Is that right? Did I catch that?
I do. That's going to be the official show mug of our GOP primary states fundraiser. We are almost there. I must say, we are over 5,000 now. We are almost there. So donate, give once, give often. This is my little creative visualization thing. If I visualize this road trip by surrounding myself with tributes to Dr. Gonzo, this trip will happen.
Right. Exactly.
So I ordered the mug. I had to special order this. I didn't have this. It just arrived a couple days ago.
Oh, well,
this is Bat Country. Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
I keep meaning to pull that as a sound drop. I will have it for the next show.
Oh, okay, perfect. Beautiful. Excellent. Well, folks, we have a great crowd in here tonight. 350 strong to start the show. That's what we love to see. Love to see that. That's amazing. That's fantastic. And then we had 70 strong over in the Rumble chat. We love to see that as well. So that's fantastic. That's great news. That's all stuff that we love to see. We had what I thought was pretty much a banger of a show last night. That was our patron-only show, but that was a lot of fun. That was a really fun show. So if you haven't signed up at patreon.com, sign up and you'll get access to that. As well as another patron-only show, which is coming up on the 31st, which is this Thursday. So that should be a lot of fun as well. So make sure if you guys have not signed up for that, that you go ahead and do that, because that was a really fun show that we had last night. And we want to thank you all very much for being here this evening. We have a lot of stuff to cover. The main story, not the main story, but it's obviously a very big story that did not really get much play in terms of our thumbnail because we added it at the last minute, is that Cornel West Bernie Sanders thing. The Bernie Sanders throwing some shade at Cornel West. That's not in the thumbnail image, but we will absolutely get to that. So thank you guys all for being here. Please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. Very important that we do that to juice the algorithm and get as big a crowd as we can in here this evening. So we have a lot to get to. We got some main stories. We have some headlines and things like that we want to get to. But first, Russell, do you have a book recommendation for us?
I do. You know, I've been wanting to recommend this one for a while. It just didn't come up. All right, so Detroit City. Can't see the city part because of the 20% discount. Detroit City is the Place to Be by Mark Benelli. This is a really, really interesting book about the history of Detroit, how Detroit went from kind of the envy of the world, this place that was really this bastion of working man's paradise, as they used to call it, right? This was the place where everyone had good union jobs and were able to send their kids to college on one income. And it talks about that era. It talks about how that era was lost and right into just the complete collapse of Detroit. So now, look, this will be a little out of date because I know that the guy from Quicken Loans, I forget his name, poured a lot of money into downtown. Like, this is basically up into when the apartments in downtown Detroit were just abandoned and you could just squat in these buildings. And, you know, from what I understand, it's not great now either, but I think it's a little better than that. Like, this was written when it was really at the absolute bottom after the bankruptcy there. But I would recommend it. It's a really good examination of the history of Detroit.
All righty. Excellent. Whoa. 433 strong in the YouTube chat. Jake is our producer in the booth tonight. Round of applause for Jake for being here and helping us out. Thank you, Jake. Jake, if you could just update me on the Rumble stuff, as always, that would be great. That would be awesome. Thank you so much. Just let me know how many people are over there. We don't want to neglect our lovely Rumble audience. So thank you guys all for being here. Or YouTube, Rumble, Rockfin, Twitch, the whole 9 yards. Let's start with a headline. This is a headline that is very relevant to our community here. This is big news that I have to break to you folks. Apparently, Graham Elwood rented out the marquee of the Gramercy Theater and wanted the world to know that Jimmy Dore sold out. I didn't know Graham had that kind of money to rent the marquee at the Gramercy Theater. Apparently, it's very important that the world knows that Jimmy Dore, in fact, is a sellout, is a grifter after all. Right-wing grifter after all. It says right there, Graham Elwood rented that out, wanted everybody to be aware on 23rd Street that Jimmy Dore has, in fact, sold out. Is that right, Russell? Is there another reason that his name was on that marquee?
No. Graham, actually, he tried to rent it, and he wanted to put on it, Jimmy, you remind me of my dad, stop it. But they refused to put that up for any price. So instead, they just laid out the facts. Jimmy Dore sold out the house. He sold out the house.
So he was doing a show there.
He had to add a second show.
And the show was sold out.
Show sold out.
I got that wrong. That's embarrassing.
You got it wrong.
Oh, damn.
And, you know, when I met him,
0 for 1 tonight.
I forgot to pitch Graham's offer of helping him out with his psychodrama expert to work out his daddy issues on Jimmy.
Well, you know. I mean, that kind of puts a damper on the story. I guess this
now we're never getting him as a guest.
I guess, but now we're just talking about a comedy show, right? Is that what this is really about? Russell seems to have attended this Jimmy Dore show. There's a picture of Jimmy on stage. There's Steph on stage, I guess, doing the intro act. I was supposed to be there, obviously. My son now has been diagnosed with mono, which is not great news because mono is a bitch, but it's better than meningitis.
It's better than
a lot of the alternatives that the doctors were suggesting it might be. So we got a real scare, but luckily he seems like he is recovering fairly well. Definitely better today than the past couple days, so that's good. But anyway, because of that, I could not attend this show. But Russell had himself a grand old time, it looks like. Here's a picture at the little meet and greet here. What did I do? I fucked it up. Well, a little bit. Sorry.
You get the idea.
A little bit. You get the idea.
The anti-grav drive was off for the show.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So everybody was a little tilted.
Here's the one. Here's the big one. This one I have right. So there you go.
There we go. Yep. That is me and the man. We mostly talked about pizza, for anyone who's wondering. I recommended the Nona Slice. I don't think he had enough time to check that out. But the show, it was really, really cool to be at a show that felt like this is what it must have felt like to be at a Lenny Bruce show in the 60s or a Carlson show in the 70s, where you have a comedian who is saying things that are dangerous that people in power wouldn't like, and that the person could suffer consequences for saying. It's been a very long time since you could really experience that, because, you know, we talked a little bit about this. There was a brief window where counterculture comedy, basically when Bill Hicks was at his height, there was this brief window where counterculture comedy was the mainstream of comedy. And as a result, it didn't really feel dangerous. It felt smart, but you never felt like when Bill Hicks went up and did his brilliant routines that still stand the test of time all these years after his death. People still talk about Bill Hicks. You never felt like Bill Hicks might not be able to play venues anymore for what he just said. Right. Whereas now, because the liberals have become the establishment, and I think this is what's really perplexing. I heard a lot of that in Jimmy's act. We're around the same age. Yeah, it's very much like what happened with New York. The whole time that I was growing up in New York, everyone talked about how they wanted to clean up New York. And then once they did, they said, oh shit, this sucks. Right, this is not what I wanted. Right. So, for decades, we made the conservatives the butt of every joke. And every teen comedy, the stupid people were the Christians and the conservatives. And we'll get into this with Tucker a little bit too, who, funny enough, from a conservative side, I feel is going through the same kind of what the fuck is going on. But from a liberal perspective, we never thought victory was going to look like this, right? Where like it would be a liberal censorship regime. I don't think that occurred to anybody. Right. I don't think it occurred to anybody that if we beat the forces of ignorance and darkness, that we'd be the new bad guys. Like, that didn't cross anybody's mind. Right. So now watching Jimmy saying things that are traditionally left, but are extremely dangerous and threatening to establishment narratives, yeah, it feels that energy, that electricity, that feeling that you're fighting against power just by being there in the room. I gotta say, I don't know if I've ever really experienced that, because when I was coming up, we had won, basically, right? There was this just counterculture ethos to comedy. It was fine, but it wasn't dangerous anymore, right? No one was gonna do anything to you for it.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if you're doing an act like this nowadays, like in New York City, or I'm sure, it's similar in Chicago or LA or any, liberal city, which is where you tend to have to play when you're a traveling comic or artist, not all the time, but most of the time. It never occurred to me that, like, you'd be afraid to offend the bartender. Like, what about the staff who happens to be working that night, who overhears some of the shit you say, and they'll be like, who's playing this house tonight? Because they're not used to hearing that. They're used to hearing a band or some, like, milquetoast lib comic, right? I mean, I always think about that. Like, what about the staff who just happens to be there because it's their job to be there? They must be absorbing some of it. What do they think, Because those are the only people in the room who... Not that they have the power to cancel you, but those are the only sort of censors in the room, right? The people who happen to overhear what you're doing, who might not be down with it.
I swear to God, I saw the Bud Light, and I was like, I don't know if he should take a drink from these guys.
Yeah, right, exactly.
He might get in trouble. Some of his acts might not go over with the Bud Light crowd. No, it was very smart. Steph did a bit. I don't even know if I can really recreate it, but it had to do with how, a friend of hers had the passport for the virus of unknown origin already at the restaurant, and how well, that's probably what it might have been like with people in the 30s in a certain place in Central Europe. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I get what you're going.
Do you see my papers? I've got them right here. So that act, it was funny. It was edgy. It was dangerous. And, Jimmy got into things that it's not that anything he said would be a surprise to you that he has this point of view if you watched his show. But he went further with things than you would go here in East Berlin. He got into his views on certain things that were interesting. I definitely felt like I came away, even though I've been watching him since 2016, I felt like I came away understanding his politics and his perspective more. And, he really tried to weave in that theme of like, it's not right versus left. People accuse him of being, he's a right winger. It's not that he's going, this is my editorial comment. It's not that he's going for the right wing. It's that he's not driving them away. He's not defining things in those terms, which I personally do not. I don't think we do. I don't think this show does. We have a lot of those people in our audience. That's why whenever we do a video about Jordan Peterson, we get it from both sides.
Sure
we get the people who think he should be censored, and then we get the people who are mad that we didn't worship him.
Right, who mad that we were too hard on him.
We were too, we get it from both ends. But I thought it was incredible to feel that energy in a room where, as I have always said and I have always felt, at the end of the day, there are more of us than there are of them. You could see it in Jimmy's popularity. You can see it in Joe Rogan's popularity. Everybody who rejects this vision of a non-class-based, culture war-based antagonism, that's not really what gets over. Everybody who rejects that formulation and just tries to speak truth to power, they're enormously successful. And that's why they're so bent on censoring voices like that. It's a real threat to power. And, you kind of have to be in a room with a comic who's saying things like that to really feel that electric energy of, this is dangerous truth that's being spoken here. It was a really good experience.
Well, yeah, look, in terms of like the energy in the room, obviously there's no substitute for live performance, whether it's stand-up comedy, theater, music, anything like that. But in terms of just communicating freely to an audience, there's no substitute for a live room either, because that's the least censorious atmosphere. Right. And so that's what we said all the time.
Well, anything can happen, right? It's not
and anything can happen.
It's
sure.
Yeah.
Right. It's happening right there.
Feeling.
Of course. Yeah. There's a certain spontaneity to it, but also, we've said this, because Russell and I both come from theater backgrounds, so we've both put on a lot of live shows in our day, and we've talked, from time to time on the show about our theater backgrounds and things like that. And one of the things that always drew me to theater was the fact that there was no censorship in the theater. You can write whatever you wanted in a stage play.
Not anymore.
And there's nothing anybody could really do about it. Probably not as much anymore, but even 10, 15 years ago, you would see stuff get written on stage.
I was doing it.
Yeah.
I was doing it. I was doing a sacrilegious naked holiday show, literally naked every year for 7 years. You still, and I was very influenced by that, Groove Tube, Kentucky Fried Movie, Saturday Night Live. I was very influenced, the Blues Brothers. I was very influenced by that anarchic counterculture comedy. That was what I grew up on, really. So my sense of humor that I brought to that was, this kind of spitting in the eye of expectations and convention was very much coming out of that spirit. But now, there's a lot of hand-wringing.
Just made it on the YouTube chat. Just made it. Look at that. Still there. Perfect timing. Look at that. Perfect. We're still there.
Well, yeah. We
scared
just lost it. We scared. They were like, what the fuck? Why did the algorithm recommend this to me? I hate Iron Maiden.
Yeah, right. Exactly, yeah.
What was I saying? Now I lost my train of thought.
Comedy, theater.
Oh, right. Okay. So there's constant articles right now about how American theater is collapsing because you have one after another of these regional theaters closing. And they're talking a lot about the economic model, which is, that's definitely a big part of it. But predictably, they don't want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is that they're producing content nobody wants to fucking see. Nobody wants to see that. People want to see things like this. That's the saddest part of it. Right at the moment that people really need that communion post-COVID, they really need a place to go that can really express what they're feeling and what they're thinking about this moment. Right at that moment, right at this time, when people need that connection the most, the whole theater administration and arts community has been overrun by shitlibs who are incapable of producing work like that. Quite the opposite. All they want to do are plays about how women couldn't wear pants in 1857.
Right, exactly.
Who the fuck cares?
Exactly.
Who cares? Nobody wants to see that who has any real problems. People have real problems now. That's not what they're concerned about.
Right. And then there's the other thing, which you mentioned too, which is definitely a part of it, that most people with real problems can't afford a ticket to a Broadway show anyway.
Well, there's that too.
So there's that too. So
but you should have the freaks of the independent theater. This is the moment we need a waiting for Lefty for our times. And the theater community has been overrun by people who wouldn't even know how to find their way to a factory floor, much less write about one.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that, a related story to that, I suppose, in a few moments also. But Russell did a little filming at the after party. Apparently, my whole family was there except for me. My brother was there. Yeah. My mother and father went because Robert Penner, friend of the show and supporter of the show, who's featured in this video a bit, I had a couple extra tickets, and my parents took them at the last minute. So thank you, Robert. And then my brother took my ticket, and so my whole family was there except me. And I guess you guys hit a diner.
And I found out I get along with the rest of them better.
Yeah, I know.
That was the weird part.
I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm the antisocial one. Obviously, I never leave the house.
That's it. We talked about that. I was talking about that with your father. That's why I asked you that.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Interesting. But here's a friend of the show, Mad Crab, friend of the show, Jose Vega, and the rest of the Weiss family at a diner. And so you tried introducing them to some chocolate egg creams.
I mean, I got the impression. I'm pretty sure they didn't know what it was. They had they did not know what it. They definitely didn't know what it was. What I'm not sure about is if they had heard of one before, but they did not know what an egg cream is.
All right. So after they tasted the egg cream, it was a subpar egg cream. Here's a few minutes.
It was subpar.
Unfortunately
for them having the first egg cream ever, I wish it would have been a better egg cream.
Not a good first impression. All right. Well, I haven't seen this yet.
It was like edible if you like egg creams, but it wasn't like an egg cream.
All right. Let's see.
Egg creams
so what's a good judgment of a good egg cream?
Dude, look at this shitty interview.
Yeah, that's like a really flat seltzer that they used. That's why it just tastes like a chocolate milk. If you have a proper seltzer, it's more like a chocolate milk soda.
It's a chocolate milk soda. That's what an egg cream is for those who don't know.
Blue bottles, and you get syrup.
Yeah, Fox's U-Bet. That's the right egg cream.
Stop it.
I'm guessing a 10 ounce glass. Then about an inch of just whole milk, and then you squirt the seltzer onto the side of the glass.
We should have your father open a little egg cream place.
Bottom condenses a little.
Yes, that would be an old.
We should have him serve egg creams at a fundraiser. Exactly.
And
As
then
a fundraiser.
the real trick, that's his brother. When company comes over, you take a little bit of the U-Berg syrup and you drizzle it on top.
So did you make this for the boys when they were young? Did you make homemade? Did you make homemade chocolate egg creams?
Yeah, no, we never really had them.
We didn't
No?
self-delivery. This was back in the Bronx.
That was back
we
in the
never
day.
really made them.
All right.
Yeah, he never
All
really
right.
introduced me to the egg cream magic. I noticed Crab there mentioned that my brother talks similarly to me. I think we've gotten that before.
Up to a point.
Similar
up to a point.
pattern of speech. Yeah, I think we're a little different. But But yeah, so that's fun time was had by all. Excellent.
It was a good time, and actually, this was too involved. I didn't even give you this video. So me and Jose, we got into a debate about whether you could have great art, because he's very into classical culture, music, classical sculpture and painting. Whether you can have that level of achievement in a society that doesn't rest on exploitation. And so we got into a little debate about that. And we are planning on going to the Met on Thursday to hash this out in front
so
of some of these actual works of art. We're going to go fight in the Met. And we're going to drop mushrooms. That's what your father said.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
We should do.
We're
going to shroom at the Met and argue about Greek art.
There you go. Well, that'll be fun. That'll be fun. I love the Met. The Met's amazing. The Met's one of my favorite places in the world.
I mean, of all times for me to go, like I'm about to spend a month walking through ruins and museums. Yeah. Of all times for me to go to the Met.
Well, hey, look, it's fresh in your mind. You guys are having an ongoing back and forth. And so, that'll be a great thing.
We IM'd about this, actually. We've continued that conversation since that night. We're like, friendly debate.
Of course. All right, well, that's excellent. Excellent. We're going to move on. Jack Sartoris, thank you for the $5. Appreciate that. So is shitting on welfare recipients progressive now? Or
always was, man.
Yeah,
always was.
Yeah.
If you didn't know that, maybe you're not a progressive, okay?
Yeah.
All right. That's how we always spent our Friday nights, shitting on welfare recipients. We would wait outside the welfare office, pull down our pants, and shit on them.
Yeah. Or only by shady gingers with suspiciously shifting accents and political alignments. All right, well, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. I haven't heard his accent shift that much. I guess we'll play the video. I haven't paid as close attention. This is a thing now, that his accent is fake, right? That's a thing that's going around now.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get into it in the segment.
Get into it. Don't worry. We'll answer the question.
We'll get into it. Jack, I don't know. Has Jack been around, or is Jack kind of new to the channel?
He's around a little bit. Yeah, he's hanging around.
Yeah, I grew up on welfare, right? So I've spoken a little bit about this welfare thing, and look, it's a complicated issue, and people who watch the show regularly, I'm not going to get into it at length. They know my views. They've heard me speak about this, but the perception that welfare makes people dependent, and it makes it very difficult, particularly for children who grow up on welfare, to grow up to know how to take care of themselves. I can tell you from experience, that's not an invalid critique. You got the idea that any kind of criticism of welfare or the products of welfare, what welfare does to people, or the dependency, to just knee-jerk attack that out of hand. I only see that come from people who really don't know anything about welfare, never been on welfare, don't know people on welfare. Lefties. That's a good definition for a lot of people on the left. They talk about things they've never actually experienced.
Yeah, but I mean, I think my criticism still stands that was a stupid line. I think that stands.
And that's what we said.
Right.
And
that's what we said.
And that's what we said. But I also said, look, on the nuance level, I'm sympathetic to critiques. You usually hear this critique come from black conservatives. And I think a lot of liberals who, let's face it, I mean, we know from the numbers, most of them are white, and they're more likely to be from upper class households. That is just a fact. So what the fuck do they know from welfare? So they hear these people criticizing welfare, and they immediately interpret it as an attack on the poor. And again, I'm not saying he couldn't have formulated that line better, and I didn't really buy, when we broke it down, his explanation that he didn't mean it that way. He wrote those lines well enough that I give him credit for saying what he means. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like it was just an inartful turn of phrase. So I agree, that was a very bad formulation. But I think there's a tendency on the left, people on the left who want to criticize him or are inclined to attack him, to take that for more than it's worth, and to have that kind of knee-jerk reaction to any criticism of welfare as being wrong-headed, and it isn't. It's more complicated than that. The argument that it is damaging to have a community, particularly to have an entire community dependent on welfare, is damaging to the community, that's valid. To say that it's even disempowering to a household to be dependent on welfare, that's valid. But the answer isn't to have a single mother working a minimum wage job and have her kids at home if you want healthy kids. That's not a solution either. That's where we're leftists, because we see that side of it. But you can't only see that side of it because it's just not reality.
All right. I mean, I have more to say, but we're going to cover it later. So, Jennifer Williams, thank you for the $9.99. Appreciate that very much. Have you heard Fannie Willis covered for current Memphis police chief created the team that murdered Tyree Nichols when her scandal in Atlanta happened? Memphis streets are talking. I have not heard about that, but that sounds like a very interesting story. I will look into it. Maybe we'll do that Wednesday. But thanks for the tip.
I've heard whispers, but I haven't had time to look into it.
Yeah, but that's a possibility for Wednesday for sure. So thank you.
You never know, man. You see these headlines and you don't know if it's down the rabbit hole or if it's valid or what it is. You know.
Well, take a look. Take a look for sure. It's definitely worth looking into. That Tyree Nichols story was horrifying, and we covered that, I think, the day after it happened. Ellen, thanks, Ellen. I'd be happy to tutor Russell in a basic Southern accent for free. Well, thank you, Ellen. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Courtney Conover.
Well, you know, there's not one Southern accent.
No, there are a few.
It's
there's
different
the
in
Creole,
different
there's
regions.
Louisiana, there's Florida, there's Alabama, where Ellen's from, obviously. Sure. Courtney, thanks for the $10. Sick of the argument that saying people cheating and getting fat, staying home to eat, faking disability, and taking benefits from actual disabled people isn't bad. As an actual disabled, I hate them too. Well, what I would say to that is, I'm not saying it's not intrinsically bad to game the system. What I'm saying is it worth focusing such ire on those people who are gaming the system? How much are they gaming the system for, right? It's not that it's intrinsically good to game the system. It's a question of, if you had to focus energy on correcting something within the system, to put energy in that direction seems to me to be a far less productive expenditure of political energy than to say, you know, organize a strike, right? Take the fight to the people who aren't paying workers enough, because that's really what creates incentives for people to game the system on welfare, is the fact that wages aren't high enough, right? To quote the great Kanye West, which I don't know if we're allowed to do on YouTube anymore, but I'll give it a shot. Before he asked me to go get a job today, can I at least get a raise on the minimum wage, right? That was the big song that came out, right? That's the line, right? Before he asked me to go get a job, can we raise the wage a little, make it worth people's while to help themselves? Because people cannot help themselves for $7.25 an hour. That's impossible. So you can't, in my view, you can't take anger out on welfare cheats when wages are so low, to the point where if you were in that position, you're telling me you'd work 40 hours a week for $300 as opposed to take a welfare check for $225 a week? Your net wage there is less than $2 per hour if you're doing that. You're telling me you would do that? I'm not sure that the average person would. So that's what I would say.
And he actually says in that video, which we'll get into more later, he recognized, like he says, you know, welfare, it's like a, you know, very small.
It's small, right? Exactly.
Expenditure. Like, he recognizes that. What I'm hearing, the more I listen to him speak, it's a guy who, like a lot of us, man, like a lot of people in America, he has good heart. He has basically good instincts. He's trying to figure it out.
Right. Right. People have complicated politics at the end of the day, right? I mean, most people have complicated and at times contradictory politics, right? So he's the average person in that sense.
That's it.
Jax Page, thanks for the $2. Glad to catch you live. Well, thank you for catching us live, Jax Page. We appreciate that very, very much. And we'll take one more before we do our next headline. We will get to all super chats, folks. So thank you very much for all the super chats. They are super helpful. Chris Bishop.
We're still on the 2 for 1. Don't forget to plug.
Oh yeah, no, we'll get that in. Don't worry. All right. Chris Bishop, thanks for the $4.99. I'm watching you guys on a plane, drowning out a crying baby with my headphones. Thanks for making my flight a little easier. Well, I hope the Wi-Fi is good on the plane and the safe travels, Chris Bishop. Watching us up in the air. Up in the air. Beautiful. Excellent. Good to know. All right, folks. So let's talk a little bit of presidential politics, shall we? This just came across the wire today via the Sunday morning shows. So Cornel West had an appearance on The Breakfast Club in which he criticized Bernie Sanders' decision to endorse Joe Biden over another progressive in the Democratic field, or maybe even Cornel himself. Bernie appeared on CNN this morning where he was interviewed by Dana Bash about those comments. So let's take a look here.
West, who is a close ally of yours, he is running a third-party campaign for president. He recently criticized you for endorsing President Biden's reelection. Listen to what he said.
Okay, now we can't listen to what he said because the Breakfast Club are notorious copyright claimers. Every time you put one of their videos up, it either gets taken down or claimed or demonetized or whatever. So unfortunately, we cannot show you what he actually said on the Breakfast Club, but we can read the reporting on it. So this is Politico. Sanders hits at Cornel West over criticism of Biden. Bernie Sanders hit back at third-party presidential hopeful Cornel West after West knocked the prominent progressive for backing President Joe Biden in the 2024 election. So now they go on to summarize what Cornel West said on the show. Some politicians are so fearful of former President Donald Trump retaking the White House that, quote, they don't really want to tell the full truth, West said. Biden has created the best economy that we can get. Is this the best that we can get? You don't tell that lie to the people just for Biden to win. That was the big quote. You don't tell that lie. In other words, you don't lie for Joe Biden just because you want him to win. And that was directed at Bernie Sanders because the question posed to him was, what do you think of Bernie backing Joe Biden, even though you two are, of course, quite tight? And so they played that video, which, like I said, unfortunately, thanks to the fact that the Breakfast Club are kind of pains in the ass, which is kind of shitty, right? This is a fair use space here. We're all in this commentary game. So, you know, that's not good. The fake failing Breakfast Club doesn't want anybody playing their material. Yeah, that's why nobody watches anymore.
Well, that's it. I mean, in terms of copyright, we can show their stuff all day as long as we're commenting on it, but they know you don't have the money for the lawyers and all that.
Right,
shit.
What are you going to do? You're going to fight it?
Exactly.
You know,
exactly. You're going to fight Charlemagne. He's a god.
He's a god. You can't fight the god.
Can't fight a god.
Can't fight a
Mythology
god.
teaches us that.
A couple of
that's something me and Jose
like us are
will
no match
agree
for
on.
a god. Yeah.
That's it.
All right, so let's hear Bernie's response to Cornel's criticism.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is that it certainly is not the best economy that we can create. That was what my speech was about yesterday. We've got to join the rest of the industrialized world, guarantee health care to all. We've got to cut the cost of prescription drugs in half. We've got to raise the minimum wage to at least $17 an hour. We've got to build the affordable housing we desperately need.
Now it's 17.
But where I disagree with my good friend,
we got
Cornel West.
$2 more on legislation that he's not going to force.
Right. We got a theoretical raise on a policy that apparently will never happen. But now he expresses where he disagrees with his good friend Cornel West.
Desperately need. But where I disagree with my good friend Cornel West is I think in these really very difficult times where there is a real question whether democracy is going to remain in the United States of America. You know, Donald Trump is not somebody who believes in democracy, whether women are going to be able to continue to control their own bodies, whether we have social justice in America, we end bigotry. Around that, I think we've got to bring the entire progressive community to defeat Trump or whoever the Republican nominee
It's almost like
will
he's
be.
just saying shit.
Support Biden, but at the same time, which is what I did yesterday, is demand that the Democratic Party, not just Biden, have the guts to take on corporate greed and the massive levels of income and wealth inequality that we see today.
Okay, well, if your two campaigns were proof of anything, it's that you cannot, at the same time, support Biden and support the Democratic Party and demand that they break free of the corporate stranglehold that has the party in its grips right now. Like, your two campaigns, not one, two, both campaigns were a test case of that theory, and they both failed. And now you come out first with this stale list of talking points, which is basically your platform when you ran. And then you pivoted to what? Well, Donald Trump hates democracy. Women are going to lose control over their own bodies, right? You basically just pivoted to the straight Democrat line, which means at this point, he is just, for all intents and purposes, another Democrat, because this is what the Democrats always say every time. Bernie's not the first person to virtue signal about universal health care. Lots of Democrats do that. He was the first person who at least
Truman was the first.
What's that?
Truman was the first.
Well, sure. But Bernie was the first person in a while who at least seemed prepared not just to virtue signal, but to actually run on it and actually promise to do it, right? And you saw the reaction to that. And so now he's still making these proclamations in support of these policies that he ran on, but he very much just pivots, very, very quickly pivots in the next breath to, but these are very dangerous times because Trump is a threat to democracy. The whole premise of your candidacy is that these were dangerous times for reasons that transcended Trump, that transcended what threats to working people the Republican Party posed, right? It's not that those threats are not existent, but the whole premise of your campaign is that the bigger threats are more urgent threats, and that's why we need to rally to transcend the sort of rank sort of partisanship, blue no matter who, right? Well, let's just keep the Republicans away and be satisfied with that. But now you see, you start on your old points, end right at these very, very standard boilerplate Democrat talking points. We knew this was going to happen. We knew that we knew he would be asked about Cornel West at some point, and we knew that this would be his answer. I mean, I was not surprised by that answer at all. I don't know if you were.
Dana, I am very glad to be appearing at a studio that has advanced on gender rights so that there are feminine hygiene products in the men's room. Because my ass has been bleeding since 2016 from the raping that the DNC gave me.
Yeah.
That's all I'm hearing when I'm watching him. He's a broken man who just keeps playing a broken record and just repeating the talking points. I mean, it's funny because I think if our audience is anything like us and as the most depraved audience on YouTube, I think they are, you probably don't hear Sanders' shtick a lot anymore. You've lost interest, right? Like, I haven't heard him run through his laundry list. That's why I didn't know we got an imaginary raise now to 17.
He gave some speech in New Hampshire yesterday about how the Democrats have to get more progressive and reject the corporate wing of the party. Nobody watched. No one cared. That was nowhere in my social media feed. Because who cares?
Right.
We've all heard it.
Nobody listens to him anymore.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I was actually, when I was doing research for the UAW segment, he interviewed them. And, you remember when Bernie used to do stuff like that, it felt exciting, right? For the same reason it felt exciting to be at the Jimmy Dore show. Because you felt like this person really meant it and they were really fighting power. Now that you realize with Bernie that this is all just rhetoric, he just does it better. He does it in a way. I mean, it's the definition of a sheepdog, right? He speaks the language of the left, at least the social democratic left, right? He speaks that language in a way that Pelosi cannot, that Feinstein, when she was still in her right mind, could not, that Biden cannot. But now it's so transparent that it's just shtick. It's just shtick. In the end, you might as well vote for a Republican in his seat. Like, what difference would it make legislatively if Bernie were not there? What difference would it make? Really, at this point, I want you to show me what he is accomplishing in his seat that would be any different if you put somebody else in that seat. What difference would it make in your life? What would you not get that you're getting now? Nothing.
Well, yeah, because the whole premise of the campaign, beyond whether it won or lost, was that there would be some sort of mobilization, right? Some
which
mass
he doesn't have the balls
of
to
people, right, who would go to bat against the system even after he loses, right? I mean, that was one of the main selling points of the campaign, to the point where, like, even if you expected the Democrats to screw him and rig it against him, it's still worth investing in because this is some sort of
We're
movement.
building a long-term movement.
Exactly. And where is that? You don't see any of that anywhere. I mean, nowhere.
No.
Nowhere. There's no willingness.
You know who you hear movement from? Grifters.
Right.
When we played, not to pick on him exclusively, but he's such a fucking easy target. When we played the little clip of Kyle torturously explaining why it would have been better for Cornel West to get in first as a Democrat, and then they could have all rallied behind him. The part of that clip that made me most ill was when he says, "It would have been better for the movement."
Right. Yeah,
Motherfucker,
exactly.
movement.
Yeah, movement, right. Yeah,
What,
exactly.
the movement to a better house for you and Crystal? That fucking movement? That's the only movement you give a shit about. Who are you kidding? That's the only people who use the word movement anymore because everybody else knows it's bullshit. There is no movement right now. There's a fractious left trying to figure out where to put its energy. That's the honest left. The people who are pretending that the Bernie Sanders thing is still going, they're all on the grift. They're all just trying to make money off what's left.
Yeah, and there's very obviously diminishing returns in that way because of what we just talked about. He gave a speech in New Hampshire yesterday. A few years ago, that have been the buzz of this whole space. Now, nobody even bothered watching.
Nobody even knew what happened.
Right. No one even knew what happened. Exactly. Colin Radix Carter, thanks for the $5. As someone who got mono freshman year in college, I sympathize with the little one. Yeah, hoping for a speedy recovery. He's doing well. He got some color back in his face today. He was looking so pale because his iron levels were down, so his lips were almost like white for a couple days there. But getting better. Thank you, Colin, my friend. I appreciate that. How about a sequel to Hamilton for the New York theater scene? Thanks for the pitch. Cool Blue. Appreciate that. Holistic Radical, thanks for the $5. Jesse Jett's song Welfare is a cogent critique of rich men north of Richmond and musically better, maybe. Discuss. I will take a listen. I'll
listen to it.
Absolutely.
Didn't Billy Bragg do something that was a response?
Yeah, Billy Bragg did something like join a union or something. I forget what his response song was, but I would listen to that as well. Thank you guys very much for the donations. We'll take a couple more, and then we'll go into our third headline, and then we'll break for our GoFundMe pitch, which is coming up. A lot of fun stuff that's in the works. So Patrick Donahue, thanks for the €10, my friend. Spot on, Keaton. Thank you. I don't know what you are referring to yet, but I'll take it. People on welfare
take it when you can get it.
Are worth none of our time. Same in Europe. Keep our eye on the real robbers this side and your side of the pond. Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate that. George H. Thomas, thanks for the $2. Appreciate that, my friend. Thank you guys very much for your support. Please hit that like button and please hit that subscribe button and the follow button over on Rumble. Wherever you are, make sure you stay in touch with us. All right. Headline number 3. Moving right along. This is another New York City story. A lot of stories today dealing with city life. That's sort of a theme, bit of an existential theme of this episode here. This is from the Lever News, Julia Rock. Friends of the court, quote unquote, ask SCOTUS to raise rents. Billionaire real estate interests and conservative mega donors with ties to the Supreme Court justices want the High Court to end rent stabilization. Now, rent stabilization is different from rent control. Rent control is very rare in New York City. Rent stabilization is actually very, very common. So before we get into this, let's just go. This is from the New York Times. Just a little overview of what rent stabilization is. Rent stabilization applies generally to apartments in buildings with at least 6 units that were built before 1974, where an apartment was leased after June 1971. This was enacted in 1969. It also applies to newer buildings that receive tax breaks because they have units that rent at below the market rate. The median monthly rent is about $1,400 for rent-stabilized units, compared with $1,845 for unregulated units. That's got to be dated because rents have just
there's no fucking way
skyrocketed.
No way. This has got to be like 10 years old.
No, it's not 10 years old, but it's probably 5 years old or maybe around the pandemic time, because that's definitely that 1845 is way higher. But anyway, I had a rent stabilized apartment in Williamsburg, Brooklyn was a 1-bedroom for like $1,550, which is about $1,200 below the market rate for a non-rent stabilized 1-bedroom in that area. It was a very, very nice area that we had the rent stabilized unit. So about 44% of units in New York City are rent stabilized units. There are a lot of apartments that are on that. You're in a rent stabilized unit, correct?
I sure am.
Exactly. So this is what makes New York City affordable for, forget about poor working class people, for middle class people, right? Without this, it would be almost impossible for any middle class person to live here.
That's why I always tell people, because the way that it works, for those of you from pretty much anywhere but New York, this would be very arcane to you. The way that this works is if you get into an apartment, they can only raise your rent a certain percent depending on what lease you take. If you take a 1 year, it's one amount. If you take a 2 year, it's another amount. So say 1% increase on a 1-year lease and 3% on a 2-year lease, right? And as a result, your rent is going to go up much more slowly than the market demand. So that's why if you get, at this point, I'm kind of one of those people. If you get somebody who moved into a neighborhood before other people moved in, then very quickly you're paying half the market rate. So this is why I tell a lot of people who tell me, like, I'll get kids on tours, I'll get like art kids who want to move to New York. I tell them, listen, if I were your age getting out of college, New York is probably literally the last place on earth I would move. The only reason I am in New York is because I got here before you. I'm not paying what you're going to pay. If I had to pay that, I would not live in New York.
And you're not even in the arts anymore because you can't be in the arts anymore. There are no arts anymore, really. Very that.
Well, there's that too. I mean, sometimes if I really get into it, I'll talk about David Byrne wrote that great article telling people, you know, he pulled a Kamala Harris before Kamala Harris, don't come. He basically said, don't come. And he explained when he was coming up, he lived in Soho when those were all abandoned industrial buildings, and he was paying $50 a month, and there were chemical smells from when it was a factory. And he said it was probably dangerous, but you know what? It gave me space to develop a style. It gave me space to develop my art. How you gonna develop art sculpting in your kitchen, working 2 jobs?
Yeah, no, and now David Byrne, you know, he's wealthy now. He lives in Chelsea, and all the apartments are rented out to people who don't live in them. They still sit empty, but they're being paid for $3,000 a month by some, you know, multi-millionaire who lives overseas who maybe uses it a month out of the year. Now, if rent stabilization goes away, you're going to see that times 100. And that's the end of New York.
You would see a mass exodus out of New York City.
Yeah, well, we get
mass
to that
exodus.
Yes. Absolutely. So we'll read a little bit from this piece here. At issue is a petition from 2 landlord lobbying groups asking the High Court to overturn New York City's rent stabilization law, which has been on the books since 1969 and limits annual rent increases for more than 1 million units in the city, nearly half of all rentals. Samuel Stein, a housing policy analyst at the Community Service Society, an anti-poverty organization in New York, said that if the Supreme Court were to overturn the rent stabilization law, quote, it's the end of New York City. That's 100% right. That's 100% right. Yep. And it's not just poor and working people who will suffer from that. It goes far beyond that, which we'll get into in a moment. Rents would go up significantly around the city. There will be a tremendous amount of displacement. You will have a lot of people leaving New York City. You will have a lot of homelessness. You'll have a lot of overcrowding. A high court ruling wouldn't just reshape New York, but would also pave the way for legal challenges to the dozens of rent control laws that exist around the country and many more currently being considered. For example, in 2024, Californians will vote on a ballot measure to repeal the state's severe limitations on rent control. At least one group petitioning the court to take the case has substantial ties to both Harlan Crow, the GOP megadonor, and Justice Clarence Thomas, benefactor. He's the guy who paid for all those trips in the story that broke a few months back. And Paul Singer, pardon me, the hedge fund billionaire who provided an undisclosed private jet flight to Justice Samuel Alito. So yeah, there's corrupt ties between these landlord lobbying groups and the justices themselves. what else is new when you talk about the sort of systemic rot in our so-called democracy. That's Exhibit A right there. But I want to focus in on what Samuel Stein said. It's the end of New York City. That's it. There is no more New York City without a rent stabilization, because literally no one's going to make the coffee. No one's going to tend the bar. No one's going to wait the tables. No one's working the bodegas. Rent stabilization is what makes New York, New York. There's no culture without rent regulation. There's very little day-to-day commerce without that. You don't have the manpower in New York City to run the city without rent regulations. So if this goes up in smoke, you're talking about the end of New York as a civilized place. It's going to be absolute hell. I mean, you talk about, if you thought it looked dystopian during the lockdowns, you ain't seen nothing yet. You let these landlords charge whatever they want, you're not going to have any fucking people in the city, because as has been proven these last few years, really the last few decades, but especially since the sort of post-pandemic upswing in rent costs, right? They don't necessarily give a shit who occupies these fucking buildings. As long as they can rent them out, they'll just rent them out to people who will use them 1 month out of the year. And they're such short-term thinkers. They're not thinking, well, what is this going to do to the community? What is this going to do to the ecosystem?
What's
what is
it going to do to
my
commerce?
To my long-term investment in the building? They don't care. They just want the money now. That's the way these guys have been. And that's the way they're going to continue to be. So if you unleash them, you're talking about absolute, utter hell in New York and elsewhere. You could bet that it's going to, replicate. Go ahead.
It's also very interesting timing for them to be doing this, because although rents continue to go up, and I've said before on the show, I understand what's going on with commercial rents. I've seen authoritative explanations for why commercial rents are not dropping, with some buildings having a 90% vacancy rate. The reason is that commercial mortgages are not like home mortgages that come due every month. They come due every few years. You have all these commercial landlords that are in between a rock and a hard place, where they cannot make their mortgage if they drop the rents. And because the mortgage hasn't come due yet, they're just praying for a deus ex machina, a government bailout, something that will bail them out. But they can't really give in to the market forces without just giving up the building like at that, which some people are doing. There have been cases where these landlords are just giving it back to the bank because they can see the writing on the wall that they're never going to be able to get a tenant who's going to pay what they need to cover this mortgage again. So for whatever reason, I don't know why, but a lot of these mortgages, the only reason you haven't seen a total collapse in the commercial real estate sector is because a lot of these mortgages haven't come due yet. For whatever reason, a huge portion of them come due in 2025. So until then, this market is being artificially propped up. But so suppose the Supreme Court strikes this down. In theory, by the time they strike this down, this would be right around the time that there's good reason to believe the entire commercial real estate market is going to collapse.
It'll probably come right before, because they're going to hear arguments if they take it up.
We
don't know that they'll take it up yet. If they take it up, it'll be during the 2023-24 session. That's when they'll hear arguments, and then they'll issue their verdict a few months after that. So, yeah, it could be around a year from now.
Right.
Is when they're likely to strike this down, assuming it makes it to the court in the first place and they actually buy the arguments that the landlord lobbies are putting forward.
At exactly the moment that you're likely to see a total real estate crash in New York, you want to try to get more money out of tenants? Really?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's incredibly short-term thinking. That's part of what I was saying. The challenge to New York's rent stabilization law was brought by two major New York landlord lobbying groups, the Rent Stabilization Association and the Community Housing Improvement Program, formerly known as CHIP. The two organizations spent a combined $4.7 million lobbying as they pushed to block the passage of a sweeping tenant protection law in 2019. The law, which expanded rent stabilization from just New York City to any locality in the state that chooses to opt in, which is interesting, made it more difficult for landlords to remove units from rent stabilization and added new protections to rent stabilized units. Just after the law passed, the group sued the city and state, arguing that the new law and New York City's existing 1969 rent stabilization law are unconstitutional. The lawsuit was dismissed by lower courts, most recently by the Federal Second Circuit Court of Appeals, but the groups claim their intentions was always to reach the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. The petitioners, and amici, friends of the court who aren't CHIP or RSA, sort of informal advisors who weighed in with amicus briefs, argue that the rent stabilization law constitutes an illegal seizure of property from landlords in violation of the Fifth Amendment's takings clause, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. That seems like a pretty thin case, since we're not talking about, confiscation of property or seizure of property.
And that's the counter argument from the lawyers on the other side.
They're just dictating certain things you can and cannot do with a property that you own. Seems perfectly reasonable that could be governed.
Unless given that the precedent, if they decide to respect precedent, has been for the Supreme Court to uphold the right of jurisdictions to regulate the use of properties, as with their landmark law ruling in 1978, that should carry over to this. It's the same principle. If you believe jurisdictions have the right to restrain commerce for the common good of the community, well, I mean, what could be a better example of that?
Right, exactly. They wanted to turn Grand Central Station into a 4-story shopping mall, and then it became a landmark, and the owners couldn't do it, right? That wasn't seizing their property.
That was the case, yeah.
Exactly. They also claim it violates the 14th Amendment's due process clause. According to the RSA and CHIP, the law infringes upon their rights to exclude, occupy, use, change use of, and dispose of their property. So that's the argument that they are putting forward. My guess is that this will not succeed just because it's been shot down in the past. But, it is a right-wing court, and it is a scary thing, because if a thing like that succeeds, you're talking about a degraded quality of life for everybody in New York City.
Dickensian.
Oh, yeah. No, it's going to be horrible for everyone. There's going to be no life to enjoy. This is what, our final segment of the night, we're going to talk a little bit about Tucker Carlson gave a speech in Hungary about the immiseration of cities and the sort of emptiness of city life. And I thought this was related in a certain sense, that the people who were doing this, even the landlords who stand to maybe make a short-term profit off of this, are doing so at the expense of quality of life for everyone in the city, including rich people who enjoy the culture and the art and the recreation and the leisure of New York City. You're not going to have any pool boys at the Soho House if you get rid of rent regulation. You're not going to have ticket takers at the museum. Where the fuck these people going to live? As it is, they're taking the subway in from the outer edges of the outer boroughs, which is the only place they can actually afford to live. You get rid of rent stabilization in those outer boroughs, what the hell? What do you think is going to be left for anybody? It's not just poor working class people. Even the rich people are going to have a miserable time, but it doesn't matter. This is the spiritual void that this country has fallen into, where all that matters are the quarterly earnings. That's it. There is no other consideration that anybody is willing to make, much less fucking landlords. And I just think it's funny how they're talking about the Bill of Rights, right? They say, well, this violates Amendment 5. And then Amendment 14 is not technically part of the Bill of Rights. It's only the first 10. The irony is, obviously, the Constitution, as great a document as it is, I'm not saying that there's no wisdom in that document. It was really written of, by, and for landlords. I mean, the Constitution was written by landowners for the empowerment of landowners. Those are the only people who had political power at the time that document was written. And now it's being invoked to basically further empower landlords to charge whatever they want to whoever they want in whatever building they want. any regulation, any oversight be damned.
Well, it's sad and it's ironic and it's telling that it's coming out of New York, because although I've often said New York is basically a Rockefeller Republican city,
Right.
it wasn't always. That's why we have rent stabilization laws. New York was known for its radical leftism at one point. We produced people like Bella Abzug, these, very fiery left radical politicians. And Koch was kind of the Jimmy Carter transition of New York Democrats, that transition into neoliberalism. A lot of people don't realize that Giuliani's gentrification program was something that Koch's last administration had really paved the way for. He was the one who first started sending out the cops to crack down and drive the homeless and street life out of the neighborhoods and to invite in the developers. And Giuliani just continued what he had started, but it was really started by a Democrat. That's how New York became what it is now. That's why New York has these unique protections. No other city in America has such strong tenant protections. And really, it's the last legacy of that progressive era in New York City. It's the last element of that still standing. So it's not surprising that it's such a thorn in the side to the people who New York belongs to now that they would come for it. I mean, they bitched about it forever. But now that they have a court where they feel like they have a chance, it's worth it to them to spend the money on the legal fees to try to take it out.
Well, this is the other thing. I mean, that's an interesting point. We're going to have a lot of scares like this because now a lot of cases are not necessarily going to be seen by the Supreme Court, but because you have such a one-sided Supreme Court, there's going to be a lot of appeals. Right. People are going to be less likely to just, okay, fine, take the L and go home. They're going to be like, no, I think we could win. If we get this to the Supreme Court, where it's a 6-3 right-wing supermajority, we have a chance. And they do have a chance. I don't think it's a particularly great chance, but there's a chance. And that would just usher in just an absolute nightmare. An absolute nightmare if that happens. And so that's what you got to look forward to in one reality or another.
If they were willing to unleash the chaos of overturning Roe v. Wade, there's really no telling. Like, you can't assume that they're going to decide anything based on the destruction to society that's going to come about through their decision.
That's true. That is true. That is a good point. Garble, thanks for the $12. The welfare remark sounded to me like a lighthearted aside to break up the heavy parts, just good pacing. He was saying obese poor people is a symptom of the problem he's singing about, not the cause. What I would say about that is, look, I've written some songs in my life. My assumption when I write a song is that a total of maybe 200 people are going to ever hear it. So you're not that precious about every line. It's just kind of something you do as a hobby. He may have written a line like that without thinking through the political implications if it goes viral and it's heard by 400 million people. You know what I mean? Like, guys like that who just, you write a little fucking song, you put it out on the internet, what'll happen? Oh, I'll get a few hundred people and maybe this line's not the best. That's what I suspect is the deal with that, if anything. But I do think it reflects a certain contradictory class consciousness that is actually very common among working people. Working people do harbor those sorts of anxieties and those sorts of angers and those sorts of resentments. That's a reason to engage with them. That's not a reason to shun them, as we will get to. I see we got a lot of people chiming in on the Oliver Anthony thing. Apparently this story still has some legs. A couple people were like, oh, do we have to hear about this again? And I was thinking,
yes.
Should we go back to this or should we not? Are people going to tire of it? Apparently not. Apparently everybody's still got a lot of things to say, which is great. Folks, you can support the show by going to patreon.com/DueDissidence. Patreon supporters and paid Substack subscribers get their name up in lights on our Patreon scroll. They also get call-in access to these regularly scheduled streams. They also get access to 2 patron-exclusive live streams per month. We're a little behind on those this month because my boy got sick, so we had to reschedule the first one. But we had the first one last night. It was a real banger. That was a lot of fun. That was, I think, one of our strongest episodes of the show we've ever done.
Because we're able to be a lot looser on those shows.
Right, we do them on
So
Rumble.
they're very
uncensored.
unplugged, uncensored, much more relaxed.
Yeah,
Yes,
and different kinds of content that we might not necessarily
things that we just
wanna
cannot
cover
get
here.
into here.
Exactly.
Increasingly so. Also, I want to say happy birthday to patron and high school friend Vincent S. There he is.
Beautiful.
Look, right when he's going across, I didn't even plan that.
Oh, look at that.
Happy birthday, brother.
Beautiful timing. Beautiful timing. Happy birthday, Vincent. Thanks for your support. We also want to make sure this week that we plug our GoFundMe. GoFund.me. Oh, yeah. We said we were going to try and copy and paste it in the chat. To
All
see
right.
if it
I'm
works,
going to try to
but
do it right now.
All right. See if you can do it. But, yeah, our GoFundMe is almost complete, actually. We have almost hit our goal. We have a 1-for-1 matching donation offer from an anonymous
looks like
donor
it worked
this week. All right, beautiful. So it worked.
All right,
Beautiful.
so I just put the link to the fundraiser in the chat. So we have a very generous anonymous donor. I'm not going to say who it is, Elon Musk. And they are going to match donations. We still got a couple days left. So this is the best time to donate to send us out to Bat Country.
Yep, and we are almost there. $5,285. So we are getting very, very close to our $6,000 goal. As soon as we hit it, we will start booking travel accommodations so that we hit the ground in Iowa and New Hampshire. Those are the definites. And then depending on how interesting and competitive the Republican primaries are past Iowa and New Hampshire, we will hit the Super Tuesday states, which are Texas, and in my case, it'll be Massachusetts. If it's still interesting past that, we'll hit Florida. If at some point the primary becomes uninteresting, in other words, if Trump blows out the field in Iowa and New Hampshire and the primary is basically over, we will set aside what funds we have left for a swing state general election tour. So none of it will get pocketed or go to waste. This isn't TYT or the Vanguard. It will all get put to good use. So
we're not
if
like
you
the
can help
others.
us reach our goal, we are almost there. How awesome would it be to hit our goal before Russell takes off for Italy and Greece next month? So there's the link. The link is also in the chat. You can also just go to GoFundMe.com and search DueDissidence, and it'll take you right there. That's another option that you have as well. But we are getting very, very close, and thank you guys all very much for your generosity. We will make it worth your while. We're going to produce some really, really fun content from the road. I mean, imagine us at a MAGA rally, just mixing it up with the deplorables.
Well, at least I know I'm not going to get attacked with a fucking cowbell and a bullhorn.
No,
they don't play that shit.
It'll be a lot of fun.
That's not MAGA style.
No.
I think it's going to be fascinating. And maybe we'll see Jordan over there, and I'll be like, Jordan, why don't you talk to some of these MAGA people over here who are not in Stormfront?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Like why you hone in on the 5 people like that?
Right.
Why'd you talk to the people like the video that we showed the other day?
Right, from More Perfect Union. Indeed.
Look, when I went out for the Trump prosecution, I found more people like that. And I didn't hide the people who weren't. I showed that. I showed the Hasidic guys who were, all freaking, Zionist and, well, as you would expect. But, man, it wasn't hard for me to find MAGA people who were like, yeah, George Bush should be locked up. It was very hard for me to find liberals who felt that way.
Yeah, no, of course, as we saw in the video that you put up there, absolutely. Roger Meadows from Rockfin, tip $2. Thank you. Peep this, guys. Short article. Yes, I did take a look at that article. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. Manhattan is the most expensive place to live in the U.S.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, that it's now number 1 again.
And
Brooklyn coming in fourth.
and Queens are both in the list of the
Yeah,
top
Brooklyn
10.
4th, Queens 13th, Nassau County 15th. Wow. I'm pretty sure, Russell, you also saw your major talking about converting commercial apartments. Oh, okay, yes, there we go. That's just the scroll on the end, to residential. Must outlaw private equity from owning housing. Yeah, no, indeed. I mean,
our mayor.
Mayor.
Yeah. They were talking about it, and the fucking city council, among them, Levi Air, Dan fucking Goldman, is that his
Goldman.
name?
Yeah.
That fucking scumbag motherfucker. They voted it down because they didn't like the affordable housing provisions in it. So, this is what you get. You elect a Levi Air, he's going to vote with his class.
Yep. And you had people in that race who would not have voted that way.
Where the fuck do you get the balls?
Mondare Jones. Yeah, indeed. So, but look, that's who they picked. They picked him because a lot of people in that district are wealthy. A lot of them are NIMBY libs. And a lot of them just don't care about that issue at all. Most of them
Doesn't
just don't give a shit.
them.
No, mostly he held Trump accountable during the impeachment. They just see him holding Donald Trump accountable. We need him in the Congress. That's all they fucking think about. That's all they care about.
That's what you call
Unbelievably
political
brain-dead
courage.
idiots. Yeah, right.
That's real political courage. He stood up to the president of the United States and he said, no!
Yeah, right, exactly. That's them. That's the level of engagement that you get from these very refined, intelligent, cultured people in the, West Village, Soho, right? That's where he is. He's Lower Manhattan.
He's West Village, yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And Chinatown, but Chinatown, to their credit, didn't vote for him. He lost those areas. But yeah, no, the rich,
Good for
white
them.
liberals.
This is a
a
story we should cover at some point, because you see this when you go into Chinatown now. No prison. What that's about is they're planning on building the world's tallest prison right in the middle of Chinatown.
I forgot all about that. But yes, Wednesday for sure we got to cover that.
Right in the middle of Chinatown.
Yep, the world's tallest jail.
Yeah,
it'll tower over the neighborhood, literally a jail. Towering over the neighborhood.
That's the thing. If you've been to Chinatown, you can imagine how disruptive that would be to the whole streetscape, because it's still all these old kind of, today we see them as charming tenements. And yeah, you drop that in the middle, like that destroys the entire neighborhood. Like it wouldn't be Chinatown anymore, because if you're going to put a jail like that there, you're going to have all the support services that come with that jail and the police coming in and out. Like it wouldn't really be Chinatown anymore.
It's a horribly dystopian thing to have a giant prison tower over a neighborhood like that. I mean, my God.
Well, especially because it's a neighborhood that's so low rise.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right,
Like
exactly.
you could drop that into Midtown and it wouldn't stick out like that.
Right. In Midtown, you wouldn't even notice it. In Chinatown, it would stick out like a sore thumb.
Well, but they would never put that in Midtown.
Of course.
It's not an accident they're putting it in the last working class immigrant neighborhood left below 125th Street.
Well, now you're going to get on tour when you do a Chinatown foot. What's that? What's that big building? Whenever there's a big building in a residential neighborhood, that's what all the tourists always say. What's that building right there?
Yeah. And I'm going to be like, well, that is the building where they used to destroy the neighborhood.
Right.
They used to destroy these Asian people that they claim to care so much about. They claim to care so much about non-white people, but, not if they're working class. They're working class. If they had money there, I promise you they would not be putting that fucking building there.
Oh, no, of course not. No, of course. It's no brainer. Absolutely. JVB, tip $2 on Rockfin. Thank you, sir. Great show, guys. Real political courage. Appreciate that. Thank you for the support over on Rockfin.
That's our motto.
Yes, real political courage. Jake is taking Rumble rants for us, too. So if anybody wants to throw a Rumble rant in, we will be able to put that up on the screen this evening. Thank you all for watching, wherever you are. Big audience in here tonight, 822 strong. In the YouTube chat, please hit that like button and hit that subscribe
I like your style there, EJ.
Yes, forget it, Jake.
Forget about it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
Laugh, thanks for the $5. Happens every year at the Edinburgh Fringe. Venues are pressured to cancel gender-critical shows and stand-ups. Frequently, pressure comes from venue staff. Edinburgh Fringe is happening now, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it is. Pretty sure that's going on right now.
Is it going on now?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, this
I think so.
happened. This happened at a venue that I know in New York, where somebody was coming from over there, actually from the UK, and the person was, gender critical. They weren't anti-trans. They were questioning some of the ideology, and the principle of fringes is supposed to be you pull it all out of a hat. Part of the charm is supposed to be the randomness of it. It's supposed to be uncurated to be a true fringe, and they were always able to do that. I mean, I saw shows at the Fringe that were, I saw a guy do a show. I don't even know if I should say it, but I saw some rough stuff at the Fringe. but back then, I'm like, I don't want to lose my channel over describing that. But yeah, man, it was understood. That's what a fringe is, and people stood behind that principle. Nobody believed that the audiences were so fucking fragile that they can't watch something they find abhorrent, right? Even assuming you think being gender critical is abhorrent, that was the spirit of the Fringe. Like, hey, man, you pick it out of a hat. Not anymore. They canceled that show. That was back in the day. I guess they changed the rules. That would have gotten you kicked out of the Fringe. You weren't allowed to do that.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's not how it works. Ava Session 7, thanks for the $4.99. Accents, don't forget the Texas twang. Well, if Russell goes to Texas, he's going to have to work on that twang for sure. But thank you for the donation. Laugh, get Jesse Jett on the show. Do it soon. Yeah, I'm in some of the same chat groups as Jesse, and I do like his stuff. So, yeah, maybe we should do that, actually. That would be fun.
That would be cool.
That'd be a lot of fun. Sincere Elise, thank you very much for the donation. Never commented live before, so hope this works. It worked. Success. Beautiful. And thank you very much. When you both get a chance, would love to hear your review of the Netflix series Painkiller. It was really good and really depressing. All right, well, I will watch it.
I have not seen it.
I haven't seen it yet, but I could do Netflix. That
yeah,
doesn't require me to
you know
leave
what
the
I
house,
really
so
enjoyed
I can do Netflix.
That I wanted to review, but Keaton, he decided to breed. He's busy. Beef, I thought was great. And that had a lot of class overtones that would be interesting to get into.
Yeah, you told me about that. Indeed. Sincere Elise, thanks again for the $4.99. The synopsis is the origins of the opioid crisis in the United States as seen through the eyes of the perpetrators, victims, and truth seekers. Well, yeah, there was the Michael Keaton series.
Kind of like The Wire style.
Dope Sick did a similar thing, where you saw it from the Sackler's point of view, from some of the doctor's point of view, and then the victim's point of view. I thought that was a great series, but I would be interested in watching this as well. All right, take one more here, and then we will take some more in a little while. Ruthless criticism. Keaton sounds like a Marxist. Keep it up. I mean, I pretty much am a Marxist. Like, I got the beard, right? I mean,
yeah.
I said I'm not necessarily a doctrinaire communist in the sense that I'm not a
Groucho,
utopian.
I'm Chico.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not a utopian thinker. So, when people say communism doesn't work, I say, yeah, that's probably true. Neither does capitalism. No system works. So I'm not doctrinaire in terms of utopian thinking, but I'm pretty much a Marxist in terms of like his critique of capital and his critique of capitalism and his analysis of society. I think is more or less right on. I don't got a problem with that. I'm certainly not an anti-Marxist. Excuse me, coughing tonight. I don't know what the hell's going on. I hope I didn't catch mono.
That would suck.
That would pretty much suck.
If you had mono at the same exact time that I go to Italy.
Oh yeah, that'd be a little brutal. The exodus already happened. Half of Raleigh are just exiled New Yorkers. Well, yeah, New York is shedding people for sure.
Well, that's part of why this is so crazy that they would pick this moment to get rid of rent stabilization.
Right. Yeah, indeed. Indeed. All right, folks, let's go to some main segments for tonight. The Republican National Committee opened their debate last week with a clip of Oliver Anthony's viral song, Rich Men North of Richmond. And this wasn't all that surprising, given that conservatives have really been active in promoting the song on social media. They've sort of taken it up as an anthem, a sort of populist, working class, sort of conservative anthem, largely because of that line in there about the fudge rounds and welfare and things like that.
Which we have it on good authority that fudge rounds are fucking disgusting.
Yeah, we do have
That's what really burned, I think.
Yeah, right, exactly. But the song never really struck Russell or myself as a particularly right-wing song. We've been over this a million times, so I won't really hammer on this point too much. But the contradiction there between starting off saying, selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay, and then, taking out some of those resentments on people who he sees as gaming the welfare system. Those are resentments and anxieties and certain contradictions, I would argue, that are very, very common amongst ordinary people who are struggling to get by, right? Yep. So that doesn't make you right-wing. Doesn't necessarily make you left-wing either. He describes himself as neither, and he actually took to social media to take issue with the fact that the Republicans used his song in their debate, saying pretty much the song was written about the people on the debate stage. So here's a brief piece from a video he posted in response to them featuring his song.
Disappointed to see, it's aggravating seeing people on conservative news try to identify with me like I'm one of them. It's aggravating seeing certain musicians and politicians act like we're buddies and act like we're fighting the same struggle here, like that we're trying to present the same message. I've had a lot of people reach out to me, and I've tried to be polite to everybody, and I've talked to hundreds of people the last 2 weeks. But it seems like certain people want to just ride the attention of this song to maybe make them their own selves relevant, and that's aggravating as hell. The other thing that I find aggravating is, it was funny seeing my song in the. It was funny seeing it at the presidential debate, because it's like I wrote that song about those people, So for them to have to sit there and listen to that cracks me up. But it was funny kind of seeing the response to it. Like, that song has nothing to do with Joe Biden, It's a lot bigger than Joe Biden. That song's written about the people on that stage, and a lot more too, not just them, but definitely them.
And that comes through pretty clearly in the song. That's one of the reasons why, for all its faults, yes, we don't have to go through it a million times, I like the song, and I thought it was great that the song sort of blew up in the way that it did. So you saw there a pretty direct repudiation of the Republican Party, sort of opportunistically trying to seize upon that song and claim it for themselves. And what you saw now in some conservative media is some conservatives who tried to claim Oliver Anthony are now shunning Oliver Anthony. Russell has an article that he'll share in a moment, but I want to share this tweet first here from Stu Peters. Oliver Anthony is fake, and Richmond, north of Richmond, is a psyop. See, he sounds like us now. Is a psyop written by the CIA, same as Toby Keith and courtesy of the red, white, and blue. He's referring to this clip where he praises diversity. So let's just play this. This is only 13 seconds.
I mean, we are the melting pot of the world, and that's what makes us strong is our diversity, and we need to learn to harness that and appreciate it and not use it as a political tool to keep everyone separate from each other,
Yeah, so that was, forget it. He's gone woke.
That's it.
He's gone woke.
He's a wokester now.
Yeah, so they want to disown him now. And look, they are the mirror image of a lot of the libs in a lot of ways. And this speaks to the failing of our politics more broadly. When a guy like Oliver Anthony surfaces, there was a tendency by the right to want to claim him, and there was a tendency on the left to try and shun him. And now that he's spoken out against racism, I guess that was too much for certain conservatives, and spoken out against the Republican Party, that was too much for certain conservatives. Now a lot on the right are trying to shun him. The left, though, still doesn't want to claim him because he's not with their entire program, apparently. The right response when a song like this catches fire is to neither claim him for yourself or disown him. The right response is to engage with him. Because what I saw when this song first surfaced was an ordinary person. I saw this guy as the reason why Donald Trump won. Because too many people exactly like Oliver Anthony in too many states felt too screwed over by really the two-party system more broadly, but especially the establishment wings of the Republican and Democratic parties. And since the Republicans put an anti-establishment insurgent on offer in 2016 and the Democrats didn't, all those Oliver Anthony types flocked to Trump. Now, I'm not saying Oliver Anthony himself voted for Trump. I don't know that. I can't say that. But what I'm saying is when I saw Oliver Anthony, I saw the kind of person who is critical to win over into a genuine, diverse, working class movement. And what I saw in the song was an openness to that message. Not total agreement on day one. But what is so fucking wrong with the left and the right, apparently, that if you don't have total agreement on day one, your reaction is to disown the person. That's the opposite of engagement. That's the opposite of politics. That's anti-politics. You're not doing politics if you're doing that, right? And a lot of people online are engaged in this sort of constant culture of gamesmanship and one-upsmanship and owning other people and, and look, I'd be lying if I said I didn't engage in that from time to time. I think we all have. We're all pretty online people here. But there are times when you have to break out of that. There are times when you have to check yourself and say, okay, yes, the guy has contradictory views. Yes, the guy is a mixed bag. That's all the more reason to engage. So on the flip side of Stu Peters, and we'll get to the article in a moment, but since you mentioned Kyle Kulinski earlier, I thought of this tweet. I wasn't planning on sharing this. He puts up his take. Rich man north of Richmond dude.
I responded
went from,
to this.
Oh, you did? Interesting. I didn't know that. Rich man north of Richmond dude went from I hate elites to fuck welfare recipients to I hate these Republicans to as Reagan says big government is the problem, all in the span of like a week. Bottom line is he's confused and incoherent, and it's obvious. Okay.
Pot, meat, kettle.
Well, yeah.
You are talking about political incoherence? Did you not see the video last week that Turncoat Dan did and Jimmy Dore did a segment on of you fighting yourself?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting point. I didn't take that angle. I didn't think of that. But that is an interesting point now that you mention it. But I just think more broadly speaking,
on a daily basis, you are misleading your fucking viewers about your fucking half-ass guru candidate, joke of a candidate, book tour candidate. And you're talking about political incoherence, Mr. Movement? Shut the fuck up.
Well, first of all, let's say he is incoherent. Let's say he is confused and incoherent. That confusion, that incoherence, those inconsistencies are very, very common amongst ordinary people. Most ordinary people have mixed views. They're not easily definable as left wing and right wing. So you can trash them as being confused and incoherent, and therefore what? Okay, so if a guy has a certain class consciousness, a certain anti-elite consciousness, a certain desire for the empowerment and betterment of ordinary people through things like higher wages, which he pretty explicitly advocates for in the song, then if you see that he's coming from that place, why let the inconsistencies in his views or the incoherence or the confusion in his views, why turn off in response to that? Why not engage that person?
Well,
that's how you do politics, is when you see a person who's maybe is coming from a genuine place but is a bit confused and has views that are a bit inconsistent with each other. The thing to do is engage that person and persuade that person, not just fire off a tweet. Well, this guy's a confused, incoherent idiot. Send. Done.
Right.
That's you're not serious at that point. You're just not. That's why I dwell on this song a little bit, because people say, "Oh, this is culture war." No, this song is not culture war. That's the whole point. The libs and now the conservatives, to a large extent, are making this into a culture war issue because they don't have the courage to face an ordinary person with inconsistent views. So they're making it a culture war thing. The libs are upset because he's got a messy beard and he lives in the woods and he doesn't signal to their sensibilities. And the right are butthurt now because they thought he was one of them, and it turns out he's more complicated than that.
I love you, but you are not serious people.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, look, I'm not going to lie, man. When I was living in Chicago after college, I got cast in Tony and Tina's Wedding because it's not much of a stretch for me to play like, working class Italian kind of thing that they wanted. And so I got cast, and it was kind of like my nightmare in hell in a lot of ways. It was almost like it was almost like a script about being put in a position where what you thought you wanted is a betrayal of everything you're about. Because what do you think Tony and Tina's wedding really is? It's making fun of the kind of people I grew up with for the amusement of rich people from Lakeshore Drive. That's what Tony and Tina's wedding was. It was those people laughing at the Italians, right? At their quirky mannerisms. Oh, they're so silly, right? I fucking hated those people. I lasted a month doing that. I preferred to go back to driving a horse and carriage than make my fucking living as a dancing monkey for those people. When I saw a lot of the left reaction to Oliver Anthony, that's the kind of thing that's going to make me end up doing a Why I Left the Left fucking video. Because that shit triggers me like almost nothing else. Because you could say it's about the welfare line. No, it is
no, it's not.
No, it's not. You don't like his signaling. You don't like the beard. You don't like the folksy thing. You don't like the references to God. And we'll get into that in the Tucker segment. You don't like his cultural style. And you justify that dislike backward from there. It is very much what Glenn Greenwald said. The left is a movement that tries to make itself smaller.
Exactly.
That's it. Everybody's competing for brownie points. And knowing as much as I do, because I'm kind of fascinated by the period of revolutionary movements of the 60s and the 70s, I'm not going to blame it entirely on social media. The left has always had this tendency towards this kind of aimless doctrinaire factionalism. I mean, the left has always kind of famously been incapable of getting its shit together around a common goal and message. It's a big part of the eternal advantage that the right often has in a knockdown, drag-out brawl with the left, that they're much more able to set aside differences of doctrine and focus on a goal than the left is. But I will say social media has not fucking helped at all.
No, certainly not. No, right.
Look, the algorithm elevates conflict, and that means that people who like to virtue signal and like to pick fights are elevated in social media, so people are trained to behave that way, even if they might not even necessarily be inclined to behave that way. So that's who you see. That's who you hear from. You hear all the jerks who say, rich men north of Richmond. Well, clearly he's, referring to slave owners. Clearly. I mean, obviously that's what he means. Clearly this is a Confederate song. So look, even a lot of people who consider themselves not Democrats, leftists, man, they're mostly not working class people themselves. They're not comfortable with working class people. They don't really like working class people. And in the end, they share the same prejudices as their lib parents. And when you see how they reacted to this guy, not all of them, a lot of them did, it just reminds you the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, man. Your fucking parents are probably MSNBC watchers. You think you're some kind of a fucking half-ass Marxist socialist, but in the end, you share their prejudices. You just dress it up with a little more material dialectics. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, at this point, Oliver Anthony has spoken numerous times to try and clarify that he's not a right-wing zealot. He even posted to his Instagram the picture of the fudge round, explaining that. You got into that with Tusker on the show that I missed. But so between that and then him telling Fox News, no, actually, giving them the diversity is our strength line, right? And now this, where he's saying, hey, it's a little frustrating that the Republicans used my song because I wrote that song about them. Those people on the stage were the subject of the song, which, think about the integrity it takes to say that. I mean, the guy is clearly a guy who's, having a little bit of a hard time getting by. We read in his bio, right? He bought this land that he still owes $60,000. He lives in a camper on the land off the grid.
With a freaking tarp over it.
With a tarp over it. I mean, this guy...
Let me see some of these cosplaying Twitter motherfuckers in that position turn down a record deal. Let me see you do that. Let me see
or
you do
trash the political party that puts him on front and center at their debate, which got, millions and millions of views, right? Show me one of these guys who's going to put the thumb in the eye of the people who are featuring him, right? Because it is true. Conservative media kind of made that song viral. They made that song viral, and then he just puts out a social media post. It's kind of frustrating that the song's been sort of used for those ends in that way. I think it takes a certain integrity to say that.
And you know what? It takes a certain kind of genius to take a guy who has caught fire like this and do everything you can to alienate him. That takes a special kind of political skill to see that as the proper course of action. That's like all the people who thought that Bernie should, like AOC, that font of political wisdom, who thought that Bernie should disavow the Joe Rogan endorsement, which he in his wisdom did.
Right.
Fucking people. All right, so see, my Queens is coming out now.
Yeah.
Okay, so in Mr. Anthony's song, Rich Men North of Richmond, a reference to politicians living in Washington, D.C., became a viral hit among conservative audiences last week. After right-wing commentators on social media praised it for its raw and real messaging, they seem to have turned on Mr. Anthony after a video emerged showing his, quote, real accent is not a twangy Appalachian one. Okay, idiots. This is like getting mad at Mick Jagger because he doesn't genuinely have a kind of bluesy American accent. It's a fucking style, idiots. It's a style.
It's a singing style. You walk up to Bob Dylan, hey, how's it going? Hey, that's not how he talks. He talks like a person. He talks like a normal person.
Right. Because he's not like, well, but goddamn. Oh, so now he's a phony. He doesn't fucking talk like Yosemite Sam.
Yeah.
Infuriating conservatives even further is the fact that Mr. Anthony also praised diversity as the U.S.'s main strength. During a Fox News interview, Mr. Anthony, who grew up in North Carolina, speaks with what sounds like a typical American accent. Oh, the horror. And by the way, listening to that video, man, he has an accent from down there. It's just not a thick one. He does have an accent. He doesn't have a standard American accent.
It's very, very common to exaggerate accents in song.
In song, right.
Especially
but
country music.
I'm saying even the claim that he's speaking standard American, only people on cable news speak standard American.
Right. Yeah, exactly,
all right? Like everyone has a little bit of a regional accent. I have one. You have one. Most people have some kind of an accent. And he definitely has one that if you listen to him, you'd assume somewhere down south. It's just not a thick one. I mean, we are the melting pot of the world, Mr. Anthony told the interviewer in the video, and that's what makes us strong is our diversity, and we need to learn to harness that and appreciate it and not use it as a political tool and keep everyone separate from each other, I just wish he wouldn't support white supremacy that way.
Right.
Because he really, right when we want to get behind him as a class warrior, he clearly reveals his true colors as a white supremacist. An ex-user whose pinned tweet has links to videos praising the leader of the American Nazi Party called Mr. Anthony. They must really dig into these people to find something. Called Mr. Anthony an algorithm-boosted, based redbeard hillbilly song guy who was faking his accent. All right. I mean, that's a little more linguistically inventive than anything I saw
at least you get
the
little
left.
style points for that. Yeah.
Definitely style points. The user also took offense to the fact the singer said that diversity is our strength. And they were not the only one lashing out at Mr. Anthony. One user said he was trying to, quote, become a rich man north of Richmond, while another came to a conclusion that many of Mr. Anthony's left-wing critics already voiced, that he was an industry plant meant to enrapture Republican consumers starving for conservative media. They're starving for conservative media? There's like a golden age of conservative media. There's so much of it on alternative platforms. You actually have an answer to the Onion now, which you never had before.
Right.
And, you know, he's going about it in a pretty funny way, going up there and saying he's not speaking for Republicans, but okay. These companies are testing the waters to see if they can create fake Republican singers to make more money off the Republican demographic. And it works. People don't see the bigger picture. There is no invisible hand of the CIA, only corporate strength. Isn't it funny? Now, that is really the bizarro world version of so much of what we heard from the half-ass left, right? Oh, this is an op. This is just bullshit. This guy's AstroTurf, right? It's the same thing.
Right,
We heard from the left. And
Yeah.
as soon as he said something the conservatives didn't
they
like,
make the exact same claim.
It's same exact claim. Conservatives. So people, if you consider yourself on the left, think about that next time your knee jerks up and hits your jaw. Okay, think a second before you fucking grab the X, as we call it now, I guess.
Right.
Popular Twitter commentator Craig T. Nelson found the conservative swift reversal entertaining. Conservatives got a hold of a clip of the AstroTurfed country song guy saying America is a melting pot and now he's fucking canceled. Also potentially a CIA agent, they wrote. So that's basically the upshot of it. So now what he was getting from the left, now he's getting from the right. If you have any political sense whatsoever, what you would see when you look at Oliver Anthony is a fucking opportunity. That is a great opportunity. You want to talk to this guy. You want to win him over to your cause. And listen, obviously for most people, because now through a quirk of fate, this guy became super famous, you're not going to get to talk to him. But if you reacted to him with a viscerally negative reaction, I have a question for you. How do you expect to organize workers? Who do you think workers are? Do you think they're like the people in your dorm room from college? Because I promise you they're not. They're not.
No.
Maybe you should go talk to some. Because it's very obvious from the reaction that a lot of so-called leftists had to this guy that that the working class is purely theoretical to them.
Oh, of
they
course.
actually
The people in the
don't
dorm room
know
went
any.
to college so they wouldn't be one of these guys. That's the whole point, right?
That's
Because they
it.
didn't want that life. Exactly. Yeah. No. Absolutely. And he is going to appear on the Midwestern Mark show on I think September 6th,
which is
amazing.
going to be fascinating.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
going to be great.
I think,
Now,
look,
do you think a doctrinaire right-wing conservative guy would take an interview with Midwestern Marks? You know how many hundreds, if not thousands, of interview requests he has had,
including
since
one
this
from
song
us.
surfaced, including one from us, and he chooses amongst a few Midwestern Marks. So yeah, that'll be great. I'm looking forward to watching that.
Yeah. So this is what I'm going to say. I know there are probably some people in our audience, and definitely some people are going to watch the clip of this who are among those that attacked this guy. So let's put that behind us, and let me submit to you and suggest to you that in the end, why don't you go forward in a different way and try to reevaluate how you react to people like this? Because I promise you, whatever decent work he might do every now and then, you're not going to build any kind of meaningful movement with Nathan Robinson's et al.
Right, exactly.
Okay, that's not who you're going to need those
of course.
people.
Yeah.
You're going to need people like
Obvious.
this. And you know what? People like this are like most of us. They have complicated politics, and they don't necessarily have it all figured out. That's an opportunity to have a conversation. What would you rather have? Would you rather have a guy like this who's questioning and searching, or would you rather have somebody who's deeply conservative and has their mind made up and feels like they have it all figured out? How are you gonna persuade that person? This is somebody who you could actually talk to. In other words, basically, I'm saying the knee-jerk reaction that a lot of the left had to this guy in this song, it's a teachable moment. Other things like this will come up in the future. Do it better. Reconsider. Don't go for the easy virtue signal if you're actually trying to build a long-term movement for the working class that presumably would need to include the fucking working class.
Right, exactly. Rumble rant from EJ Imagine. Thank you. Russell, try Ray's Candy on Avenue A for a good egg cream. You ever have Ray's Candy? I never heard of Ray's Candy on Avenue A.
No, you know what closed, man? Did you ever go to, 7A's closed now? Everything that used to be by that corner is closed. But right off 7th and A, there was this little Polish stall where they made the best egg creams and malteds you've ever had.
Yeah, no, never been. Never been. J Paradise 123 for $1. Thanks for the donation. R.E. Marxism being utopian. Please check out Engels' Socialism, utopian and scientific. I take your point. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. All right, let's do a couple more super chats here. Mastario, thanks for the $25. Here's $25 for your GoFundMe. Don't want to sign up there and ask for your phone number. All right, fair enough. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you for the donation, man.
Thank you.
Charles H., thanks for the $10. I think the only path forward is to destroy the PSYOP left-right mentality in this country. Every moment it pops up exposes its corrosive nature, and come at this from a circular perspective, non-sided. Yeah, I think that's generally correct.
You know what? I don't think he'd mind the spoiler. That's basically the message Jimmy closed out his show with.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically his message. Yeah.
Right. Hey, let's get past this right, left. Basically, he didn't say it in these words, but no war but class war.
Right.
That was essentially his message.
Right. Ruthless Criticism, thanks for the $5. I remember the high-rises of some of the old mill towns when I lived on the East Coast, basically prisons anyway. Well, we're going to get to that, actually, toward the end. Yes, indeed.
That was prophetic,
so thank you. Yes, indeed. Indeed it was. Cool Blue, thanks for the $4.99. Picture Mr. and Mrs. Howell from Gilligan's Island, and that's today's wealthy Democrats, minus the Howells' likability.
I'm going to touch you!
Yeah, I'm going to touch you. Yo, if you guys didn't see that was on the Friday morning show. You got to go back and watch that clip of the Democratic mega donors.
Get out!
Yeah, absolutely losing their shit on some climate protesters in Nantucket. George Gunnell, thanks for the $9.99. Appreciate that very much. Jacksonville, we spend hundreds of billions supporting white supremacy, bigotry, and hate in Ukraine. Yeah, pays dividends here at home. Ruthless Criticism. Painkillers about what happens to Ferris Bueller once he grows up is truly heartbreaking. I gotta watch it. Yeah, I'm surprised they did that because what was Dope Sick? I forget what service put that out. Was that Hulu? I forget
Hulu.
what it was. That was Hulu.
It was Hulu.
Yeah. Because this seems like it's very, very similar in its premise. Dave Dillerai, thank you for the $15, my friend. Jordan will no doubt have his 8-foot-long microphone distancing pole and 2 masks when he goes into the Trump rallies. Yeah. You know, I don't know. He went to the last one. I forget where that last one was. It was fairly close, but I don't know if we'll run into him or his camera guy.
I mean, look, this is where Jordan is a riddle wrapped inside an enigma, inside a mystery to me, because his politics would lead you to believe that he would want to go find the MAGA people or, based. And he only goes for, the Jerry Springer.
Yeah, he goes for the low-hanging fruit, yeah.
I don't, that sums up Jordan's choices as well as anything.
Right.
That's what makes him so frustrating.
Indeed. Yeah, I agree. Ruthless Criticism, thanks for the $10. I mean, you must be doing well at that job of yours. Thanks for the donations, my friend. Bill Bradley needs to hear this Marx quote. Free state, what is this? It is by no means the aim of the workers who have got rid of the narrow mentality of humble subjects to set the state free. Thank you again, my friend. Virtuoso, thanks for the $4.99. If you don't check all the cultural signifying boxes, then you're not accepted as genuine. What a country we live in. Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
This guy would fucking break out a little Starbucks latte,
right?
Put on a little fucking Lululemon stretchy pants. They'd love him.
Yeah, well, he would just have to get like a Mumford and Sons makeover. They like that shit, like the Mumford and Sons, the Lumineers. I was listening to the Cumtown podcast a while back. The one of the guys there had a great line about that era of music where like the Lumineers and Mumford and Sons got big. He's like, remember back in like 2010, 2011, there was like this resurgence of Civil War music, which is basically what it is. Like guys with guitars, no drums, they just stomp on the floor and bang the guitar and wail. Yeah, it's like music from 150 years ago. There were a few bands like 10, 15 years back that got really big doing that stuff. He could have been that guy and they would have loved that because that's like a Brooklyn hipster, sort of aesthetic now. So yeah.
Are y'all ready for a drag show?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. June Felix, thanks for the $1.99. Appreciate that. And Nick Quiros, there's a style of music called folk punk that blends the working class style of the streets and Appalachian poor anger. It's also hard on the ears.
I mean, it sounds like something I would kind of like, actually.
It does sound like something I would like. I will check that out. I'm always in the market for new music. Big music fan myself. All right. Speaking of working people and working issues, the United Auto Workers voted 97% to authorize a strike against the big three automakers, Ford, GM, and Stellantis, which is formerly Chrysler, if a deal is not reached between labor and management by September 14th, so we're now just over 2 weeks away. The UAW President Shawn Fain has outlined his demands. They include wage hikes of 46%, an end to the tiered wage system that basically pays new hires less than people who have been on the books for a while, reinstating cost of living adjustments, and restoring defined benefit pension plans for new hires, which were actually discontinued by the automakers in 2007. At Stellantis, only 30% of their hourly U.S. workers get those defined benefit pension plans, which basically guarantee what benefits are going to be lasting after you retire in advance. Now, Fain has caused some panic on the part of management, finance, and finance media. Jim Cramer, very, very afraid of this guy, reminds him of the 30s, union leaders. Because of his defiant posturing.
Reminds me of when workers have power.
Right, reminds me of when they actually demanded things. Exactly.
It's not good for the markets.
It's not good for the markets, no. And, he has caused a lot of panic because he has postured himself in a very sort of defiant manner from the start of his tenure back in March, and also his opening response to Stellantis' sort of opening proposal. So he got a sort of opening contract offer from management, and it included things he didn't like in there for obvious reasons, ending a moratorium on outsourcing of jobs, more spontaneous rescheduling policies. So basically, the big three automakers could rearrange your shift at the last moment. Extended periods of time that you need to work when you start before you start getting paid time off. So that was a big no. But then most importantly, Stellantis wanted the right to amend terms of the contract without union ratification, which renders whatever agreements they reach kind of meaningless if those terms can then be changed without the union actually coming and voting on the change. And so, given the weakness of that opening offer, Shawn Fain, in Fain-esque style, as will be said of him in the future, I think, gave this response on a UAW live stream, which was broadcasted to their YouTube channel.
When we tell you what, brothers and sisters, when we get things like this from the company, and they want to sit there and talk about they're not asking for concessions or looking for concessions. Everything they're looking for in this document is about concessions. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do with their proposal. I'm going to file it in its proper place because that's where it belongs, the trash, because that's what it is.
So as you can see, not the most diplomatic response, but I think that was the right response to that opening offer. Stellantis then issued the following letter in response to that video. So that video aired live on YouTube on August 8th. And then Stellantis replied with this letter. The font is very small, but I will read it. I have it over here. I won't read the whole thing. It starts out, colleagues, With a month under our belt, I wanted to share some perspective and facts with you about our ongoing negotiations with the UAW. I was incredibly disappointed to see Mr. Fain's online communication earlier this week, meaning throwing the contract in the garbage. It does not fairly
communication on
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It does not fairly represent what is happening in these negotiations. The theatrics and personal insults will not help us reach an agreement that continues our proud history of providing good wages and benefits to our employees and maintaining Stellantis' ability to be competitive in the market. These negotiations are critical and require cool heads and a focus on reality from everyone involved. So part of the reality has to do with the shift to EVs, which is obviously going to cause some labor disruptions as well as supply chain disruptions, since inherently, the business of making cars is going to be different. But given the record profits that these companies are seeing, given the fact that workers are still not even making back the losses, not from the Reagan era, from 2008, from 2007. They're still behind where they were then. They obviously want all of what I just mentioned earlier. In addition, Fain has also proposed shortening the work week to 32 hours. Don't forget, it was unions that gave workers a weekend, a 5-day work week. So now he's trying to push this to a 4-day work week, 32 hours. And that has been a controversial claim because obviously making cars is not something you can do remotely. You have to be at the site to make the cars. So we will talk about that in a moment. But I wanted to play this video because he gets kind of philosophical here and kind of political here in ways that we don't generally hear from union leaders anymore, which I think is really interesting because he really talks in this clip about value, about human value, and really kind of detaching human value from market value. He doesn't put it exactly that way, but you'll kind of see what I'm saying. This is only 2 minutes, but it's worth listening to.
Right here in our own country, the talking heads have lost their shit every time I talk about the 32-hour work week. But you know what? They and their coworkers were working from home all throughout the pandemic. And I recently read an interesting study by Deloitte that said most workers in the financial industry are either working from home or coming into the office only a couple days a week. And this study found that 66% of those workers would quit their job if their employers made them come to work at the office 5 days a week. And you wonder why that is. Because they found out during that time that all that extra time at home improved their relationships with their children by 70-some%. It improved their relationships with their spouses and partners over 60-some%. With every relationship category in their life, because they were able to work home more and spend more time at home with family and friends, every relationship category they looked at, it improved over 50%. So it turns out people are happier when they spend less time at work, not more. And you know what? I've heard many of these people, the pundits, want to say, yeah, well, these people have an education. Well, UAW family, you know what I say when they say that to me? I call bullshit. Many of our members not only have college educations, but during the pandemic, we were deemed essential. Our members risked their health and safety to keep the lines running during COVID. Some of our members even gave their lives. So now we continue to risk our health and safety, our mental health, our relationships, and all that by being overworked and underpaid. So here's my question to all of you. Isn't our time just as valuable as the time of the white-collar workers? Aren't our families just as important as the families of company executives? Isn't our own health just as valuable as that of the talking heads on television? You know, UAW family, our demands and our fight are about more than just us. They're about the double standards in our society.
Yeah, just really interesting framing there. Isn't our time...
Well, that's a Marxist argument.
Of course. Isn't our time just as valuable as the time of white-collar workers? Now you say, well, how does a corporation determine value? They determine value according to market dynamics and market incentives. And you would say, well, why wouldn't they determine them that way? That's their role. They're a business. Their job is to pay you what you're worth per hour. What he's talking about is actually a lot deeper than that. And it's actually really interesting to see a labor leader talk like that. Say, okay, well, you're going to have to pay us enough so that we can live on 32 hours. That's our market demand. We're making that market demand because we are asserting our human value, which is transcendent of whatever market value you place on an hour's worth of our work. In other words, we're going to add some of our human value to that dollar amount that you think is worthwhile. We have to raise it to you because you know what? We have lives too. And white collar workers who get paid to sit at home and work on their laptop, first of all, I would argue, I don't know this for a fact, but I would bet everything I have on it, most of those workers are not working hourly. They're on a salary, right? Yeah. And so they're not logging hours. They're not punching the little virtual clock, right? And having every hour that they put in or not put in timed. And a lot of workers who work from home, trust me, I used to work from home. You don't actually put in that many hours. You hang out for most of the day. You wait for a meeting to come and go. You check emails in the morning. You check emails at lunch. You check emails at 5 o'clock. And that's it. You're putting in about half the time that you quote unquote, invoice for if you're invoicing based on the hour. A lot of people are not. A lot of people are on salary anyway. And so he's making the argument here, hey, we need quality of life. We need time with our families. We need time with our kids. We need time with our spouses. We need time to flourish as people, not just as functionaries. Right? Not just as machines that build your cars. We're people. We need to be treated that way. And since we are interacting with our place of work, talk about a Marxist argument, right? We need that interaction to provide us fulfillment. And if it can't, then we're not going to make a deal. So, when I see a guy like that, I see that guy has a future as a politician because that kind of communication is a lot bigger than what's being negotiated.
Right. You were saying something before that was interesting. You were saying they changed the way
I should have said it on the air. That bit you just went on sucked ass. But before the show,
I'm giving you the opportunity now.
Okay.
You were saying that they changed the way that they elect the union leader, and that was part of how he came to power, that it was more among the executive committee, and it's became more democratized. Was I understanding that correctly?
Did I say that before we went on, or did you read that somewhere? I don't remember saying that.
That they changed the way that they elect the union leader.
Well, he was elected on a slate. So there were, I think, a slate of 7 candidates that were voted in, and his slate won overwhelmingly. So it wasn't particularly close. I'm not sure bureaucratically how it worked.
Maybe I did read it somewhere. It's very interesting, this moment, and really we kind of have a theme going on in this show. I mean, it ties to the rent control thing too. I mean,
and our third segment,
and our third segment, we're really in this moment where workers are pushing for their rights harder than they have in decades, and at the same exact moment, the people who have pushed them to such desperation that finally they're standing up and fighting back and rejecting what I would argue is this kind of Reagan nonsense that a lot of working people did swallow for a while. Quite a few of them bought, because the country was still prosperous enough to afford to buy into that, right? To afford to buy into the culture first kind of signaling. I'm an American, right? They got away with that shit for a while, but it's wearing thin now as people lose their houses and see their devastated, formerly prosperous towns. And at the same exact time, these vampires are trying to go further. Like, when you really look at what they're trying to achieve, it is the you will own nothing and be happy society. That's why people invoke it so much. Because if you keep squeezing people like this for every dime and dollar you can get out of them, I mean, clearly that's where that goes. And with permanent capital buying up the housing stock all over the country, what are they trying to achieve? They're trying to achieve a nation of impoverished renters who get by with the bare minimum, who entertain themselves with TV and the internet and social media, and get used to living with less. That's why I've brought this up before. It always reminds me of the line Ming the Merciless has in Flash Gordon, where he talks about what he's going to do to humanity. And Flash Gordon says, well, what are they going to be? He says, well, they won't be quite the humans you remember. They'll be more tractable. It seems like this is the Ming the Merciless economy, right? That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to lower expectations, and they've already done it, lowering expectations to the point that people accept this as normal. And that's already been achieved. People already accept things now that if you tried to do this to American workers in 1965, you would have had the pitchforks and the torches out for you. So we've already had the frog in the pot of boiling water effect, where people are used to much, much less than what they used to expect. But it seems like we've hit a moment here where the battle is finally being joined. Finally, the workers are standing up and saying no more. And it's an open question what they will do in response. I think really when you look at a lot of the culture war stuff, and this is something that like our friends at RBN will often point out, and they're right about it, like it is a psyop to keep the working class fighting over nonsense. It absolutely is. Trying to stigmatize and censor any sector of society that represents a threat as bigoted, as racist, as homophobic, to try to create these absolutely abhorrent categories and labels that can't be argued with, and to put them on anyone like Joe Rogan, who questions an establishment narrative. All of this goes back to this program of stripping the working class of its wealth. And finally, you're seeing a certain portion of it fight back.
And they're fighting back against management because they can't fight back politically in terms of taking their case to any sort of government body, because the government bodies are just completely non-responsive. And so you talk about Marxism, it's been brought up a few times. That's what Marx always said. He said the real fight is going to be workers organizing at their place of work. That's it. That's really where the fight is going to come down to. UAW has withheld their endorsement from Joe Biden. They have not endorsed him yet. When Joe Biden got that big string of union endorsements earlier this year, UAW was not on that list. They're still not on that list. They still have not endorsed Joe Biden. And I think that has a lot to do with Shawn Fain and the resolve that he's showing. And he's right, because this does not look like a guy who's ready to blink first. That's why odds makers are saying there's probably going to be a strike on the 14th.
Oh, yeah. Friend of show, Tusker, tells me that she's the one who told me about the change in the voting. And yes, it's true. I'm not pulling that out of my ass. Okay. Apparently they did change the voting rule. And she's saying on this slate, they got rid of the class collaborators, essentially, and the no corruption slate won.
Right. There was the no corruption slate. That was what he ran on. Yeah, indeed. Excuse me.
All right, don't get that mono, motherfucker.
Yeah, no, I got to watch out for that. I don't know what that was. All righty. We have one more segment. We're going to take some super chats first. Thank you guys very much for your generosity this evening. We appreciate that. Voice of the people, thanks for the $10. People who are or have been working class got this moment. It's all the PMC or ex-lib people who didn't get it. You're talking about the Oliver Anthony thing. I think that's right. I mean, I do. I sense that. And I think because the online space is so tribal, everybody's always looking for a win online, because what's the most gratifying thing you could do online is own somebody else, right? Yeah. And so, like, just sitting back and waiting and seeing and engaging slowly but fruitfully is not the kind of thing that, like, Twitter was really made for, right? And so there's a tendency to just pounce on somebody when they say something that you think you can nail them on, right? Or retweet them if you think that, it's something that adds to your cause, right?
My basic dislike of Twitter continues unabated. I go on there, say some nasty shit about Sulu, and I leave.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe Stephen King for a bonus.
Exactly. Roger Meadows, this one's on a ticker, so I can't put the whole thing up here on the screen because it'll take me too long to read. But he says, exactly, Keaton. Most people who are not politicos have mixed views. People think independents are moderates, but that's too much of a broad brush. Exactly. If they took a real observation, they'd find that we are socialists on some issues and conservatives on others. It depends. Yes, indeed. Indeed. I agree with that. All right, let's take one from Joe Paradise. Thanks for the $1.99. The accent, they're mad that he praised diversity. Yeah, no, that's what they right.
That is, yes.
Right, exactly. Well, yeah, they were so eager to claim him as one of them. And then when they found out he wasn't, a lot of them freaked out. Judy, thanks for the $4.99. It would seem that Oliver Anthony might be open to the message of Cornel West. Yes, indeed. Well,
exactly.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. 100%. 100%.
Thank
Very
you.
good point.
You get it, Judy. That's the point.
Exactly.
That's the point. That's a gift. That's a gift to have a guy like that who has that kind of class antagonism and has that kind of integrity. Look, man, you're living in a trailer. That's no joke to turn down a fucking multi-million-dollar record contract. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, right, of course. Yeah.
I mean, come on, man. If that's not a person you want to convert to your cause, who is?
Exactly. No, exactly. 100%. Andrew, thanks for the $5. Wingnut Dishwashers Union, Jesus Does the Dishes, awesome folk punk song. All right, I will look that up.
I will check that out.
Jesus Does the Dishes. I'm writing it down because that's something I'm
That sounds like fun.
But yes, sounds like fun. Got it. Thank you, Andrew. 420 from DC. Listen to Days and Days from H-Town. Great folk punk. All right, getting a lot of music recommendations here. Perfect. Love it. Thanks, guys. Underhill, thanks for the $5. We demanded wages after COVID, and they just raised prices to compensate. Yeah, we can't win in this system with these leaders. It has to change. Well, yeah, I mean, that's where you need... That's why guys like Shawn Fain are sort of helpful or hopeful, make me hopeful, because they have a sort of big picture view of this, right? He has a sort of existential sort of take on what his workers are looking for, both in and out of the workplace. And when you can't lobby for that in the halls of your state house or in the halls of Washington, D.C., because the politicians have all been so corrupted that the whole system is just unresponsive to that kind of democratic input. The only input you have available to you is going directly to management. And if they write you a contract that sucks, yeah, you pick up the garbage can, you throw it right in, and you say, come back when you're serious. And that's why people are saying, there's in all likelihood going to be a UAW strike in mid-September. Smart money's on that.
Yeah, and I just want to point out very quickly, because the vote was overwhelmingly for is Canada a liberal hellscape shitpost, so I'm not getting to do the Hollywood one. But I just want to point out, because I keep trying to explain to my friends in the entertainment industry, one of the reasons no one gives a fuck about you guys being on strike is because it's an industry with a unique level of visibility where they could really bring attention to other people's strikes, and they never did. That's a big part of it. And right now, they're on strike. Do you see them saying anything about the auto workers? Do you see them saying anything about Amazon workers? Even now, they're not reaching out, right? They expect everyone to come to them, and that's part of why nobody's there for them.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a big part of it. Absolutely. JVB, thanks for the $2 on Rockfin. You know how to thread the needle, which is the only way forward. Fuck the duopoly. By the way, folks, post-duopoly show is going to be tomorrow at 8:15 p.m. I think you put that on. I'm probably going to be late because I have an open house at my kid's school tomorrow, but that'll be starting at 8 o'clock over at RBN, or 8:15, I think they just said. Roger Meadows, thanks for the $2. Decrease the hours and increase the pay. 6 hours a day, 5 days. That's one way to get it down to 32, right? So I don't know if maybe 32 would be 4 days, or maybe it would be 6 hour days. But yeah, that's one way to do it for sure.
For me, I would rather have an extra day off. I think most people would feel
I think most people would probably want to have the extra day off. Indeed. Cool Blue, thanks for the $4.99. UAW needs to get income increase for active and retired employees. The auto manufacturers have been very profitable. Strike if it has come to that. Yes. Well, one of the things that Shawn Fain was saying is that when you outsource production to Mexico and you pay workers $45 a week to make your cars, they still sell it for the same price that they would sell it for if they made it here. You're still selling a truck for 70, 80 grand. So the profit margins are just insane. He was talking about, and I didn't know this, he says labor costs are about 5 to 10% of what you end up selling the vehicle for, right? So if labor cost is only 5% of what you're selling the vehicle for, they got plenty of room to come up. And so they're going to have to
it's
come
all
up.
about full disclosure. Now that we you can see I'm not taking management side here. I do have a holding in Ford. It's a rare case where we're discussing companies that I actually have a stake in, but I don't give a shit about that. If I cared about
where the fuck do you get the balls?
I would have made very different choices in life if I lived for the dollar. No, man, fuck those motherfuckers, man. I'm a long investor in Ford. I think they've got an advantage in the EV truck market. That is not to be construed as financial advice. But I'm going to say, because of that, I mean, if you look at how they discuss everything, everything's about juicing the stock price, man. That's all this is about.
Oh yeah,
it's
exactly.
not that they're not profitable. It's not that they don't make money. It's all about pleasing the investors, because what's bad for workers makes investors happy. That's it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 100%. All right, we got more super chats that we will take after this final segment of the night. This is a doozy, folks. This is Tucker Carlson in Budapest. So Tucker Carlson went to Hungary and gave a speech on Hungary and about the values that America tries to prop up around the world and the values that it tries to shut down around the world. And he got into some pretty philosophical territory. I listened to the whole speech. I think it's worth listening to the whole speech. It's about 26 minutes. We're obviously not going to play all of it or even half of it. We're going to zero in on about 4 minutes where he talks about stuff that we've talked about earlier on in this stream. For people who are watching the clipped version of this, kind of existential, philosophical musings about what American life has become, the difference between city life and country life, differences between material wealth and spiritual health and wealth, I would say. And the fact that, as he says at the opening, our political class doesn't even pretend to want to make our lives more enriching anymore. So we can start this. Russell, if there's a point where you want to stop it, we can stop it. Just let me know, because I'm just going to kind of let it play. If there's anything you want to add in, we'll add in.
Well, you're showing the clip you sent me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so did you wind up watching the whole thing?
I watched the whole thing. All
right, yeah, so we'll talk about it.
Okay.
The people running the United States are no longer even pretending to offer a better life to the people who live there, which is a huge change. I mean, throughout the course of my life until fairly recently, we had people I voted for in office, people I would never vote for in office, but all of them made basically the same promise. Elect me, give me power, and I will make your life better. And here's how I'll do it. I never hear anybody make that case in the United States. And what they're offering is a world in which human flourishing is, if not impossible, very difficult. The ruling party is the party of the childless, the unmarried, the people who are working for low wages for large corporations and living in tiny apartments in overcrowded cities that are rife with crime. That's not a cliche, that's true. It's not a talking point. It's true. Who votes for the people who run the United States right now? People who are, again, working for big nonprofits or big banks, living in crowded conditions, very often alone, in big soulless cities,
what are you
having
trying
their
to say?
food delivered by...
Yeah, right. Talking about me?
It's almost like he's been following me around with a camera.
Yeah, I should have thought about this when I sent this to Russell. Said I should have put a trigger warning on the text message there.
I'm very triggered.
Yeah.
Well, play it through and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we can play it through.
Immigrants and spending their time glued to a screen. What does that sound like to you? It sounds like prison, actually. It sounds like prison. When people violate our laws in the United States, how do we punish them? Well, we execute a few, not very many. But mostly, our harshest punishment is locking them in a small cell where they can't see the sky, where their food is delivered through the bars, often by immigrants, from the commissary, which is the Uber Eats of prison, where they have to sit cut off from nature and in solitude for years. Well, that's the life of your average Democratic voter. Solitude, isolation, cut off from nature. Who are the people who oppose this? And some of them are Republicans. You're not going to hear me say word one in support of the Republicans, by the way, who have collaborated in the most dishonorable possible way with the Biden administration. So instead of saying Republican, I will describe them as anyone who's not with the program, which is the majority of people in my country. Where do they live? And more important, how do they live? Well, they're poorer generally on paper, but are their lives worse? If you live in a place where you can see the sky, where you can make your own food and maybe even know where it comes from, if you can go outside and say identify 3 species of trees or hear birds or experience silence, the rarest commodity in the modern world, silence, where you can hear voices that aren't being broadcast from NBC News or Google, maybe higher voices, those are the people who are not with the program. People who have a daily experience of others and who have a daily experience of nature. And those people are much more likely to acknowledge a power beyond themselves and beyond their government. And there's a reason for that, because they can see it. When you're isolated in a cell, living, as the urban planners of the United States now refer to it as, in density, which is somehow supposed to be good for the climate or the world. No, it's death. It's enslavement is what it is. When you're living crowded as you would on an industrial farm as a cow or as a chicken in a pen, you are not liberated, you are enslaved, and you can't think clearly, and your reference points are gone, and you can't see the stars, and you can't see the trees, you cannot see God's creation. All around you, you see what? Drywall and screens made by other people, people who don't mean you well, and your ability to make clear judgments, to think clearly, to think rationally, goes away. And the next thing you know, you're still wearing a COVID mask 3 years later. Because how would you know not to?
Okay. All right. So this is yet another case where up is down, left is right, and everything is topsy-turvy. Because this speech could have been given by some hippie starting a commune in 1967. That is this very back to nature. We live in a very artificial society that warps our perception of reality. And you have to get back to nature, because that's where you'll find, the hippies weren't fond of the term God, life force, Gaia, whatever term they might have used. But yeah, I mean, that's this very anti-modern kind of a diatribe that he went on there. If you look at the whole thing, it actually made me curious about his religious views. He's an Episcopalian, but he feels that the Episcopalian Church, there was one clip he had that was kind of made the rounds, because some people speculated it was part of why they fired him from Fox, because he described the Episcopalian Church as barely Christian anymore. I assume what he means is they've gone too far left or gotten too much into left culture war kind of things. But he speaks also. It's really, if you want to understand where Tucker Carlson is coming from, that speech really articulates his entire worldview about diplomacy, about politics, about modern life, about culture and social mores. And, he is definitely you know, a conservative. He praises Reagan in that speech. But he also, as is often the case with Carlson, as is the case with that segment, he says a lot of things that make a lot of sense. Some things that he brings up that, you know, the left does have a hard time with was he says that the administration hates your country identifying as Christian. And he said, you know, and he says personally, I don't have a problem with, say, Indonesia is mostly Muslim, identifying as Muslim, but why can you uniquely not identify as Christian? And you know what? I mean, there's some validity and some truth to that, particularly given that he's framing it within a kind of non-intervention in other people's culture, foreign policies, kind of like what China is doing. He basically articulates, well, it's not our business in our diplomacy to tell other countries what they should do or what their values are. The purpose of diplomacy is to persuade a country to align with our interests. The rest of it is not relevant to what we're doing. And he was specifically talking about, and I looked it up, there is some basis to this. We have a gay ambassador there who's really needling them about their policies around LGBTQ rights. You know, now you might feel good. Okay, I don't see us do that in Saudi Arabia. Do we go to the Saudi Arabia and insist on, apparently, like he basically trolled the country that he's the ambassador to by having a big pride event in Hungary? Okay, I mean, you might agree with that, but okay, would you agree with doing it in a Muslim country? So he brings out what I would argue is a hypocrisy around that. It does seem like the one thing you can't identify as is Christian. Like, it's not as if we have a blanket problem with countries identifying with a particular religious alignment. It's only a Christian alignment that we seem to have an issue with.
Well, he mentioned Russia as well.
He did.
He mentioned how, you know, a lot of negativity towards Russia has to do with their socially more conservative views that are sort of informed by the Christian faith. And, you know, this is something that gets brought up a lot about Putin's attitude towards gay people, right? I mean, you hear that brought up in passing a lot. And it's not a point to bring up in passing so much, because a lot of this global realignment has to do with which countries deserve access to international markets and which countries do not. So you're basically seeing this like globalist sort of ESG scheme where every country, every society gets a certain ESG score. And those who score well are invited into the club, and those who don't are not. Russia, throughout its history, has been the odd man out in that way. They remained Orthodox when much of Europe went Catholic. And so they've always been kind of seen as this relic of the past and not with the program. Tucker even used that exact phrase, with the program, right? And you could apply that internationally. You could apply that domestically here. But that bit about life in the city versus life in the country, the people who are pulling the strings, and by pulling the strings, we're not talking about, you know, next level conspiratorial shit. We're just talking about the people voting for the people in power. That's what he said. Who votes for the people who run the country? Well, at this moment, it's people in the cities. And these people tend to be a lot wealthier on paper, but how do they live? A lot of them are unmarried, childless, isolated, glued to a screen, locked in a cell, in a poorly lit apartment where they can't see the sky very well. And he compares that to a prison, and then he compares, you know, what we can loosely refer to as the deplorables, right? The people who are not with the program, as materially a lot worse off, but spiritually a lot better off, because they're not plugged in all the time. They can see the sky. They can identify the trees. They're more in touch with the actual world than the people who, looking at it from 30,000 feet, you would think would be so much happier because they have so much more power. But do they seem happier? Do these PMC libs seem happy? They seem fucking miserable. They're completely humorless. They're droll. They're boring. They're uninteresting.
Right.
The art they create sucks. The art they consume sucks, right? Like, what lives are they actually leading?
They're very denatured.
Exactly. You posted I think it was on your Facebook the other day, the Bob Dylan quote, which I've seen multiple times. What's money? A man is a success if he wakes up in the morning, goes to bed at night, and in between does what he wants to do. Well, who's richer in that sense, really? You know, he raises that question. That's a very important philosophical question to ask. It's also a very important political question because the people who have the most power, the people whose voices count most in the society, are people who are not creating good lives even for themselves. And I connect this to the rent control segment because you have landlords who are now waiting, chomping at the bit, hoping the Supreme Court lifts the rent regulations. Why? So they can charge more for the apartment?
Right.
That's going to completely destroy the actual quality of life in your community for everybody, not just the people who get evicted, but the people who enjoy New York for what it is, this great cultural center. You're willing to completely gut that for $1. To what end? To what actual end are you willing to do that? You're going to be more miserable as a result of that, but you're willing to do it anyway. So there's this very self-destructive streak amongst politically connected people right now, which speaks to an overall rot in the system. What is it hurtling towards? What is it building towards? These people don't really have an answer for that. The people in power have no answer for that. The people who are not with the program have a better answer for that in the sense that they find meaning in what's around them because, as you said, they're more in touch with the real world, with the natural world, with people around them. Tucker Carlson does not own a TV in his home, which is amazing because the guy made his living in TV. He does not have a TV.
Did you do the math on he's been with his wife for 39 years? That means he met her when he was 15.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
I knew he married very young.
He's 15.
I knew he married very young. I didn't know it was
apparently they started dating. Well,
high school sweethearts, right?
I'm sure they didn't marry when he was 15.
No, sounds like
he
said
he's been with his wife for 39 years, and he's 54.
Right.
So yeah, they started dating when he was 15. So, you know, and this is part of what I saw too, listening to everything that he was saying. You know, there are a lot of people on the left who, you know, and it goes back to the Oliver Anthony thing too. I would say that Oliver Anthony is closer to the left than the left some people who consider themselves left want to admit, whereas with Tucker it's more complicated. Like, he clearly I don't think Oliver Anthony would praise Reagan. I'd be surprised based on other things he said. Yeah, man, I mean, he's a conservative, but it's more complicated than that. And I thought something that he said that was very interesting that explains why Tucker has evolved, whereas none of his peers that I can think of have. He describes a philosophy of humility that is very much something that you would get if you were a believer of Christianity, and you know, truly a believer, not a mock virtue signaling believer, like a true believer. Yeah, I mean, Christianity is very built around being humble and having humility. And he spends a lot of time talking about that and talking about how you should have the humility not to assume that you know everything about the argument on the other side with someone you disagree with or someone else's situation. And he applies it to nations. That's part of his rationale for we shouldn't interfere with the internal culture of another nation. He uses the metaphor of a marriage, that when a marriage splits up, a lot of people will say, oh, well, clearly the husband was this or the wife was that, but really you don't know. And he says, if you don't even understand what goes on inside another person's marriage, how can you understand what goes on inside another person's country? Listen, you could debate him, but that's not a monstrous observation. That's essentially what I came away with. There are things he said there that I did not agree with, but he also said we should be able to disagree, and I should have the humility to realize I don't know everything, and maybe the person I'm disagreeing with is right. And clearly he practiced what he preached Because why is he the only one of his whole Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity set to evolve? Clearly, he has evolved. He is not the same Tucker Carlson of 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think he really understood the Trump movement. He understood Trump's populist appeal in ways that a lot of his peers only kind of pretended to because they have a finger in the wind and they realize that, okay, now if we're going to get paid to back Trump, we'll do that. But, you know, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Bill O'Reilly, these guys are just reading the fucking prompter. They don't really have much going on in the brain.
Right.
He obviously does. He was, if you look at his old clips on Crossfire during the Iraq War, he started out an Iraq War zealot. He was a neocon stooge.
I remember. Yeah.
You know, so he obviously did undergo a genuine transformation of sorts. And I think because he's just smart, you know, he obviously has a real brain. He has a certain curiosity that a lot of his peers lack. I can't imagine Sean Hannity thinks about politics in his spare time. I imagine Sean Hannity shows up to work. Okay, what's on the prompter today? Okay, I'll read enough backstory so I could do the interview, and then I'll go home, and he's watching football. Tucker, like I said, does not own a TV. He's not plugged in this way. You know, he's not on social media all that much. Now he posts his show there, but he's not a constant presence online, right? And so, you know, I think he's a person who has a lot more intellectual and psychological and philosophical depth than a lot of people in his space. And I think what he realized in 2016 was that whether you agree with a person or not is less important than whether that disagreement matters. Because once the political establishment just runs roughshod over the population and implements their will, at that point, our political disagreements don't matter because we can't influence anything anyway. And I think Tucker really rebelled against that in a real way. And I think that's part of what we try to do here on the show. That's part of why I thought this speech was so good and part of why he's been so useful, despite the fact that I disagree with him pretty strongly on a large number of issues. He is a populist, not in the material sense. He's obviously a rich kid who grew up wealthy, and I see some people going on in the Rumble chat here and in the YouTube chat, not a lot in the speech about monopolies and deindustrialization.
Right.
True, fair enough.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He's a conservative.
Right. So all that, yes.
He's not a leftist.
No, he's not a leftist, but he's also, I mean, he's talked to, in that famous interview with Ben Shapiro, he's talked about how he would regulate self-driving trucks out of existence so that we can protect the jobs for workers, even though it's anti-capitalist, right? So he's not a doctrinaire Reaganite anymore.
No.
Part of the speech was about how Reaganism has kind of become obsolete as time has moved on.
That was, when he, even as he praised Reagan, he said, it's no longer applicable to our times. Right. But I think most importantly, what he feels is that we need to get back to a political paradigm where the debates that we have actually matter, where the debates that we have actually can influence political decision making, because he has it in his head, rightfully so, that right now they just can't. That's why you got guys like Shawn Fain preaching that shit, not to the politicians, but to management, because the whole political system is just unresponsive to any of those things. Right. And he didn't use the term postmodernism, but he attacked the kinds of debates we're having, because he said, well, you know, if you're having a debate where you think, you know, more money should go to the working class and somebody else thinks there should be tax cuts for the rich, all right, you're a Keynesian and you're Milton Friedman, right? That's a debate we can have, and where we all have the same goal, right? We're trying to make a society where everybody's prosperous. And he said the debates we're having now, they don't have a goal of making people's lives better. They're just nonsense.
Right.
They're not based in anything. So I think for the left, you know, the challenge when you look at somebody like Tucker Carlson is, you know, you have this person who has an enormous platform. I would argue probably the most prominent person, maybe even more than Joe Rogan, I would say his voice has more impact than really anyone in the media space.
Yeah.
And
that's
hey,
probably right.
Hey, look, he aligns with, I think, most of us in feeling that the system needs to be shattered, that the system needs to be broken. So, you got to look at the issues that he opens up. I'm very glad he takes on some of the issues that he does and gives them the visibility that he does. Like, look, what he said there, I'll give you a brief origin story. So, as you can probably imagine, I was a bookish kid who read all the time. And, this is going to sound like a movie, but literally, person who would go on to be my best friend who passed away a few years ago, Joey, he saw me reading The Once and Future King on my fire escape when I was 12. He said, "Hey, kid, what are you doing?" Like, I'm reading. I was very snotty with him. And, well, you come down and play some football. Now I'm reading. And he kept bothering me every day to come down and play football. Until finally he said, "If you don't come down and play football, I'm going to tell your mother you smoke pot on the corner." So I went down and played football. So I had this experience of having been kind of what Tucker Carlson's describing, where you're in a room and you're kind of cut off from nature and you're not really physical, right? And I had the experience of what it did to me psychologically and even physically once I went out and did the things that our species are made to do. I mean, football, it's you're doing what you would have done hunting for game for the tribe, right? It's what you're doing with your body. It made me psychologically healthier. Very interestingly, I was one of those kids, I was always getting sick. I stopped getting sick. My immune system became great. All of a sudden, I stopped having, my allergies went away. So honestly, that's part of why I react to the COVIDians the way that I do. Because I look at that and I'm like, that shit's not healthy. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. Like all the freaking anti-sanitizing stuff, man, you have to have a certain amount of exposure to things. You have to have a certain amount of physical presence in the world. And also just, that kind of social interaction and that kind of social bonding. I mean, I think it's necessary. And I think this whole world that we've created, particularly for children, is just absolutely awful. And I do believe what he's describing of people living in these very unnatural environments, not really seeing nature, surrounded by sheetrock. Yeah, man, I think that's why these fucking people are running around with masks on all these years later. I think that's why so many of them, when you interact with them, they are extremely neurotic, phobic, fearful people, because their brains are not functioning in environments that humans were designed to function in. They're damaged by being overly acculturated and surrounded by artificial geometric forms rather than the more natural organic forms of nature. That has an impact on your brain and on your psychological health. And I think, and generally this comes from what we call the right today. But I when they talk about how keeping you in these artificial environments and pumping you full of these fearful narratives is a way to control you, yeah, I think they're right. And again, that is a classic 60s, 70s era counterculture argument against modern technological society, that it is damaging people psychologically, emotionally, that it takes them away from their intrinsic humanity. I feel that's what he's talking about there. And as with so much you hear coming out of the so-called right today, that is a classic left-wing diatribe he just went on.
All right, well, we're back on YouTube Wednesday night. Tune in on your tablet, iPhone, or any device you have at your disposal. Make sure that you never miss an episode. Yeah. I think that's more or less right, and that's what he touched on in that segment of the speech. And yeah, I recommend everybody watch it because it is interesting and it is eye-opening, not just from a cultural point of view, but from a political point of view, because you have to ask, okay, what is the world that these people are creating, and are they even consciously creating a miserable world? Like, I don't think they're doing it consciously. I just think they don't think about it anymore on that level. They don't actually stop and think, okay, what world do we actually want to live in? And are we creating a world that we actually enjoy, that we actually like, that's actually pleasant, that's actually fulfilling? So yeah, deep stuff there. Deep stuff. I thought it was quite well done. It's on his Twitter feed. You know, he doesn't post that much, so you can go and find it and watch the whole thing. It's about 26 minutes. I definitely recommend it. DC, thanks for the $5. Want to know how bad inflation has gotten? Back in my grandpappy's day, he was able to buy a home and provide for his family by the age of 10. Excuse me. Ruthless criticism, thanks for the $2. Shawn Fain sounds like a Marxist. Keep it up. He does. He does indeed. I started this because this is a good point. This is what Yang Gang said almost 5 years ago. In terms of, human value versus market value, he made that point very, very specifically and explicitly on the debate stage, which I thought was a very good point. And yes, so you're right about that. He did talk about that. Cool Blue, thanks for the $1.99. UAW elects its leader from entire membership. Yeah, Tusker messaged Russell about that, not me. But yes. Yep. Roger Meadows over on Rumble says time to end strikes in the private sector altogether, bypass unions, and go straight to worker cooperative ownership. Yeah, you floated that to Shama Sawant. She gave you, I thought, a pretty good answer. In fact, I meant to go back and clip that, and now I probably will, because I think I meant to, but I never did. So thank you for that, Roger. Appreciate you. Charles H., thanks for the $5. I love that message from the union leader. Also, I've been saying for a long time, body cams on all politicians. Yeah, especially for lobbyist meetings. Yeah, they should have to record a lot of these meetings. Absolutely. That's a good idea. I like that idea. I can get behind that. I never thought of it, but yeah, that's not a bad idea. Oops, did I just lose the one from Charles? No, we just read the one from Charles, right? Yeah. Tusker, thanks for the $5. The empire is sucking up all the industry from Western allies so it can prepare to go to war with China. It also means draining the wealth internally. Well, it certainly feels like they're up to something. They're certainly up to something. It's something no good. Thanks for the $2 ruthless criticism. Oliver Anthony sounds like a Marxist. Keep it up. Yeah. Got to watch that interview. I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be, I think, September 6th. Ruthless criticism. Thanks for the $2. Tucker Carlson sounds like a Marxist. Keep it up. Look at this. Good day for this guy. Good day for this guy.
They're all coming in your direction.
Over here. Indeed. Yes. Dave Delarai, thanks for the $12. Appreciate the donation, my friend. One new thing I'll never get over. You buy a doc on a platform, you can't always watch it when you want. Might be unavailable. No movie on my shelf ever did that unless it was borrowed or fucking stolen. Why? Did you have a thing where a movie that you bought, disappeared? Are you talking about the difference between the analog DVD world and the streaming world? Is that what you're getting at? Because that's an interesting point.
You remember, you're probably too young to have experienced these. When people had VCRs.
I remember VCRs, yeah.
For a while, it became, fashionable to have a bookcase, but with tapes.
Right. Yeah, like a bookcase.
It became the new bookshelf, right?
Oh yeah,
you would have VCR tapes.
Yeah, you would have a little video library, and then some people even did that with the DVDs.
I got a lot of my film education that way because my first serious girlfriend, her parents were yuppies, so they had Ingmar Bergman and Woody Allen movies. So that exposed me to that when I would go to her house.
Oh yeah, you can go and that's what I always loved about Blockbuster Video and music stores. You would go and browse and find new things by browsing. When you can just search for what you want, on the computer, you don't get that same exposure. Especially, yeah, exactly. Especially, pre-streaming. Like now with the streaming and stuff where you get unlimited music, you can kind of be more liberal about searching for things, so it's a little better. But yeah, there's no substitute for the old record store, the CD store, the movie store.
All right, the oldies will appreciate this. I talk about this on my Harlem tour sometimes. All right, so Red Fox. You know who Red Fox is?
Yeah.
All right, so Sanford and Son, right? So, you know, he's hugely famous, probably the most popular comedian in America, late 70s, early 80s with Sanford and Son. And then everyone got a VCR and saw his stand-up routine. And people were just shocked because he was to this day, he's the dirtiest comedian I've ever seen in my life. It would be kind of like if all of a sudden you found out Tyler Perry does a dirty stand-up act in Vegas. Right. It would just be very weird all of a sudden see that. So people were absolutely shocked. But I would recommend his album, Baby You Gotta Wash Your Ass, if you ever want to hear some really dirty comedy. Even by today's standards, I've never heard a dirtier comedian than Red Fox. What's really funny is Malcolm X was a busboy with him here in Harlem in the 40s. And he mentions in his autobiography he was the funniest guy he ever met. So if you've ever heard Red Fox do stand-up, you have to wonder, what exactly was he saying to Malcolm X that he thought was so funny that he mentioned it in his autobiography?
Right. Did somebody ask about that in the chat? For
No. Just came up.
Just amusing.
Yeah.
Robert Penner, member chat. Thank you, Robert. Tucker's painting a dichotomy between crappy city tenements and idyllic countryside, but so many people live in suburbs, where they have to drive everywhere and their kids can't explore on their own. That's true. There is a lot of truth to that, but I think even in the suburbs, there's a certain exposure to nature, a certain fluidity to life, that you don't get in a city apartment, right? And I say this as someone who loves New York City. I love New York City. DC, thanks for the $2. Listen to William Francis by Chumbawamba. Mate, you're the only person I have ever know of who knows a different Chumbawamba song. Besides the
I was just thinking that.
I was like,
they wrote another song?
Textbook one-hit wonder, but apparently you know a deep cut from Chumbawamba. All right, I'll check that out. Interesting. All right. All righty, folks. Is that all we got for tonight? I think that's everything. Is it not?
I will drop the GoFundMe link in the chat one more time.
Yeah, one more time for the GoFundMe. Also, we've been doing pretty well on our patron drive. We're moving toward 500 patrons. We're up around 300 now. We had some new signups, so thank you all for that. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/DueDissidence.
Foolproof the operation.
Exactly. You put that in you put the link in the chat already?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So patreon.com/DueDissidence. That's how you can support the show and keep it going. We had a fantastic show last night, so if you want access to that episode, join up and check the last post on the Patreon and on the Substack, and you'll get the link to that stream. That was a great show. We will be back. Well, we'll be on RBN tomorrow night at 8:15 for the post-duopoly show. I'll probably be late to that one, but it'll start at 8:15, and then we're going to be back here on Wednesday night, and then another patron-exclusive stream on Thursday night, and then another main show Friday morning, making Russell work for his vacation. Russell's going to be gone. Well, not gone. Not for you. He'll be out of the country. He'll still be doing 2 shows a week while he is away, and I will be plugging in some guest hosts for the Friday morning shows during his vacation time. But yeah, a lot of shows to do before you take off.
Oh yeah.
A lot of
have
stuff
to earn
coming
it.
down the pike.
Plus,
Yes.
I have a comedy thing coming. I won't say what it is. And I have the shit post I promised I got to do.
Yeah, that's true. You got a lot going on. This week, but this was a good start to the week. Our Sunday evening show. Thank you guys all very, very much for being here. Thanks to the YouTube chat. Thanks to the Rumble chat. Great crowd over on Rumble tonight with a really, really lively chat. That's always wonderful to see. And thanks to our folks over on Rockfin and Twitter as well. We will see you all back tomorrow on RBN at 8:15 and back here on this channel Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Thank you all very, very much for being here. Till we see you again, be safe and be well.
Courage.
Please clap.